I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Happy Sunday, guys. Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabs podcast is also a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays and Fridays, and you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sundays. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble. And welcome back, guys. I missed you on Friday. I know Jill will be here in just a couple of minutes, but I do just want to give you a recent update. I did have a procedure on Friday. That's why I didn't live stream Friday, but I am feeling much, much better. I got a lot of sleep over the weekend, so I think I was mainly pretty out of it. That and watching like horror shows and stuff like that. I'm still on my horror kick, so it is what it is. Sorry. So I'm still on that. But the good news is that I did go to the gym this morning. So that's a good thing, because I hate missing like too many days in a row of not being able to go to the gym. So I'm glad that I was able to go this morning. So I'm just taking things, kind of slowly, but I had to get my weights in. It is what it is. Had to get my weights in. So Jill Stein will be here in just a second. Before Jill arrives, I do want to go ahead and show the thumbnail, so you'll see what we're going to discuss today, because I also have news stories as well, as I'm sure many of you know, those of you who are familiar with me. Tonight we are discussing, of course, Jill Stein will be here to talk about her 2024 presidential campaign. We are also going to discuss Elizabeth Warren and Ro Khanna concern. If you have not seen this, Elizabeth Warren has been confronted in public here. We're going to go through that and the connection to the Ro Khanna interview in reference to a ceasefire. We're also going to discuss the GOP issue from the GOP primary debates. I don't know if all of you saw the debate, because I wasn't here on Friday. I didn't get a chance to talk about it then, but I am going to discuss it. But more so, a couple of snippets and highlights we're going to talk about in reference to that debate, but also a particular issue which I noticed with those three candidates in particular, which is Vivek Ramaswamy, Ron DeSantis, and Nikki Haley, and why I think it could be problematic for all three of them, something that they share in common. And then last but not least, we are also going to discuss Stephen A. Smith is actually pushing Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson for president for 2024. And we're going to get into that discussion. For those of you who are not familiar with the sports world, you may not be familiar with Stephen A. Smith, but we are going to explain who Stephen A. Smith is. And I don't know why they were speaking to him about politics, but I'll get into all of that and this issue, or this push with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, because there are people who are pushing him apparently on both sides of the political spectrum here. We have people on the Republican Party and the Democratic Party that have been asking Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson to run for president. So we'll get into all of that as well. I also want to go ahead and give a shout out to everyone that is a Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much for your support, all the patrons in the house. If you are interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: Ultimate, Sabinators. There's also Sabsters. Don't forget about the Sabbies. They're a healthy bunch. Lots of people there. And of course, members. All of their names are listed here, and their names are also featured across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. Thank you guys so much. I really do appreciate your support. I already see the comments about The Rock. We'll get into all of that. We will get into all of that. Another thing I did want to mention to you guys, something I'm going to start doing this week that I haven't done on this show before, but I don't get to watch a lot of independent media actually while I'm participating in independent media, believe it or not. But every now and then I do get to catch snippets here and there. And I did see an interview last night that I think all of you should watch if you get the opportunity to do so. So something I'm going to start doing this week is if I catch something that I think is really good, and particularly the content and the substance is good, I'm going to shout it out on this show once a week. And so for this week, the first week of doing this, I highly recommend that you catch the stream that JB Font did last night with Danny Haifong. I think it was about a 3-hour stream. It's incredibly resourceful, especially for those of you that are interested in foreign policy. They talked about Israel and Gaza. They also talked about China and BRICS. Danny Haifong is really knowledgeable when talking about foreign policy, but that particular interview, I felt like there's a lot that you can learn there. So I want to shout out that on this show. Let me see if I can go ahead and share it because I didn't put that there, but just something different that I want to do. Like, you guys know me, like I bounce around from here and there. Like sometimes I stick to one thing and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I decide to do different things. So let me go ahead and share my screen here so you can see what I'm talking about, because I definitely think that you guys should check this out. And I'll make this a little bit larger for you to see. So there is the stream there. It's called Danny Haifong Joins. And then he also discussed Jill Stein 2024. That is on JB Font's channel. Check out that interview that he had with Danny Haifong, because I thought that was I thought it's a very informative discussion. So like I said before, I think that if you don't know as much about BRICS or as much about China and Israel and Gaza as well, definitely check that out. So that'll be my shout out for this week. I don't know, maybe it'll be a Sunday thing. What do you guys think? Sunday thing? Maybe? We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Let me go ahead and go to some of the comments here before Jill arrives. Thank you so much for the super chat. Perfect. Seitanyu on Netanyahu on CNN for 20 minutes defending genocide. Oh boy. Ay. Thank you for the super chat. Perfect. And thank you for the super chat, John. So far, Cornel West is the only presidential candidate to speak out in defense of Uhuru 3. Please ask Jill Stein if she will be the second. Thank you so much for that, John. I think Jill spoke about that before when she was on my show before, but I don't know if I brought it up again since her presidential campaign. Interesting. Let me go to some of the other comments here. There's a lot of comments. Multimind says, Haifong's a low-key human, interesting style, smiley face. A low-key human? Low-key human. That's an interesting thing. Let's see who else we have here. A lot of hellos. You guys are shouting out each other. Joe says, I hope Danny out with moderating, and to get my honest opinion, he's extremely informed and in my opinion has done more than the US State Department combined. Yeah, I mean, Danny is, for the longest time, I felt like he was one of those channels that was just underrated. And it's one of those things, again, like if you just can't find that person, if you can't find that channel, then you don't know they're out there, right? But Danny has been doing excellent work. Boo Boo Gang. I want to know why Stein thinks she has a better chance this time than last time. That's an interesting question. Just going to some of the comments here. Sam says, did anyone see Trump praising Xi and Mao? LOL. I did not see that yet. Someone mentioned it to me, but I didn't. I haven't seen it yet. I'll have to check that out. That's interesting. Woo! It's a crazy week, you guys. It's a crazy week. Z Manny says Green Party platform supports freeing political prisoners. Thank you for that, Z. Jacqueline says, I tried his channel out today thanks to JB. Oh, cool. Awesome. So some people they're finding it. They're finding it. Justin says, please ask Jill to talk about ranked choice voting to end the duopoly. I believe I have that question on my list. Yes, I do have that one already there. What is this, Liz? It's a different time and we have a bunch of duds running and people are smarter this time around than last time. Interesting. Scrooge says Danny and Richard Medhurst have been doing very important work. Yes, they have. Actually, Danny was just in Vietnam, if I'm not mistaken. I have to double check that, but I think he was just in Vietnam recently. Let's see. What's this, Menudo? Despite Biden's poor poll numbers, just as they did in 2016, Democrats would rather lose to Trump than run a candidate who was most likely to win against them. Yeah. I think that I just think that you have two corporate parties. And I think that the Democratic Party, even when Bernie was running, I think they would have rather had Donald Trump win than Bernie Sanders win. They're just, it's crazy. It's crazy. Let me see some of the comments here. Ilhanner said, like George Carlin said, we live in a country of owners and the owned. It's the WEF that runs the world's governments, not the people. George Carlin was a real one, huh? I don't think some of the things that you can say that he said you can say today just because people are just so critical. Thank you for the super chat, Raphael. Sister, I watch you every day. Thank you. Oh, thank you. That's really sweet. And shout out to Audra for becoming a Sabby member. Thank you so much, Audra. Let's give her a big whoop, whoop. Shout out to Audra. Shout out. Shout out. Do All Things with Love said just stopped in to say love everybody. That's really sweet. I love that you guys are so positive, you know, sometimes like in the chats. That's really sweet. Miguel says George Carlin knew too much. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, buddy. That's why I said I don't think they could do what he's doing today. One more thing I did want to shout out to before Jill comes. You guys, I just want to remind you that we are having that food and clothing drive this Saturday in Boston. Rome from RBN, my comrade, he's going to actually be here as well. He's doing a tent clinic, a pop-up tent clinic for people here in Boston. Now, the actual food and clothing drive is going to be at the Marcus Garvey Center in Roxbury. So I don't know if everyone's familiar with that neighborhood, but that's where that's going to take place. That's actually a recovery center. So we'll be actually distributing clothes and food, maybe non-perishable food items there as well. And then Rome's also going to do the tent clinic. And it's been really difficult. One of the things we just met earlier today, those of us that are part of the RBN Boston chapter, one of the difficulties that we've run into is the fact that now the mayor of Boston is starting to, they've moved the homeless people. So there were homeless people at Mass and Cass. They took those tents away and they're trying to basically push them out, you know, of that area. So that's an issue. There were supposed to be temporary beds that they would set up for them. Apparently, you have to have like a medical issue in order to have access to those beds. Now, there's all these different things that they claim to do to fix the homelessness problem here in Boston, but it's actually not fixing the homelessness problem. So that's another thing that we're running into. So long story short, they're trying to make it more difficult for us to feed people here. Particularly homeless people. So I have to be careful how I do things, if that makes sense. Whereas I didn't have to be as careful before. And I tell you, that's the city, though. That is the city. Any more comments here? I'm just going to check on Jill real quick one more time. Just to check, make sure. I think I sent the. Okay, there we go. But yeah, things are getting very difficult for us, unfortunately. That's just how it is. But they're always making those changes. I want to make sure I pull this up here too. I want to start off actually with this video while we wait for Jill, and I'll play it again later because it's connected. I want you to see and hear how some of the voters actually feel. And some people have had enough. And so I have this here from Professor Zinkus. This video has gone viral, by the way. But this young woman says, I'm not voting for Joe Biden and there's nothing you can do about it. So I want to go ahead and play this. Listen to this.
I'm not voting for Joe Biden. And there's not a goddamn thing any of you white motherfuckers on this app can do to change my mind or make me feel bad about it. I'm a black queer woman in America. You can't make me feel bad for shit. It's way too many people in here trying to make people feel bad about not wanting to vote for him. If it's between Trump, a treasonous dictator, and Joe Biden, a genocidal fucking maniac, we don't have a lesser of two evils. And just because you don't value the lives of people of color, of black people, of queer people in this country, doesn't mean that I feel the same. What you're really worried about is losing all that privilege that you have. What you're really worried about is finally being affected by the things that these politicians do to us. I'm not impressed. I'm not impressed with your allyship. Because is it really allyship if you're threatening people who you are saying you're an ally to into voting for someone who doesn't give a fuck about us? Y'all do this every 4 years. And 4 years from now, after whoever gets elected next year is in office and has been for a while, y'all gonna do the same thing. When does it stop? When does it end? Are we gonna be voting for the lesser of two evils for the rest of our lives? Because I'm not doing it no more. I don't care. This place has been shit for a lot of us. And if you think that you're gonna make us feel bad or scare us into voting for someone who hates us with the threat of, oh, it's gonna get worse, you got another thing coming. Free Congo, free Sudan, free Palestine, free Hawaii, free everybody oppressed all over the world. But liberation is not gonna come by voting in Joe Biden. And if you have a problem with that, you can come fight me. But you're not gonna beat me. And in the words of Katniss motherfucking Everdeen, as far as I'm concerned, if we burn and been burning, you burning with us, bitch.
Okay. So yeah, that video has gone viral. So more people are speaking out and they're like, no, we're not doing this. I do see Jill's in the background. Jill, whenever you're ready, just give me the thumbs up and I'll bring you in. Okay. All right, guys. My special guest tonight is Dr. Jill Stein. She has just recently announced that she is running for president. She's actually seeking the Green Party nomination for president for 2024. Jill, welcome back.
Great to be here, Sabby.
All right, Jill. So the last time you were here, I did ask you if you were considering running for political office again. At that point in time, you said that it was possible, right? So here we are. And you have announced that you are seeking the Green Party nomination for president for 2024. I think the first question that I have for you, which I think a lot of people want to know, you ran for president in 2012 and you ran in 2016. The political landscape this time around is a little bit different, meaning that when you ran before, we didn't have the war in Ukraine. We didn't have this war with Israel and Gaza, although the occupation was still an issue, but things are definitely more escalated now. And now we also have multiple candidates that are running outside of the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, which it seems like people seem to be more excited about the candidates running outside of the two-party system than the candidates running within the two-party system this time around. I saw recent polls that showed that RFK Jr. is at like 22%. Another one said like 19%. Cornel West, I saw one poll has him at 8%. Another one at like 3%. Depends on which poll you're looking at. But these two candidates in particular are also getting a lot of attention from mainstream media, which I think typically we do not expect from third party and independent candidates. So I think the question that some people have is, why did you decide to run, given the fact that there are already candidates running outside the two-party system? And I'm curious to hear if there was one particular issue in general that actually made that decision for you.
Yeah, great questions. And, I think we are in the perfect storm right now for breaking the duopoly, because the duopoly's been breaking us for decades. And I think it's reached absolutely intolerable levels. And I think our campaigns in 2012 and 2016 were really, ahead of the curve. They were really calling it like it is, that we need to challenge empire and oligarchy, and our lives actually depend on this more and more. And I think, the people listening in this audience, know that better than anybody, that we are facing crushing inequality, endless war, which is endangering and impoverishing all of us, and a climate crisis, as well as an assault on our democracy and a few other, incredible crises. But they're all kind of converging, and they're not getting better. And I was hopeful that Cornel West would be our candidate. And, so I was not planning to run, but I thought it was really important for us to keep building that movement, and that movement which has the capacity to really challenge power. And at the end of the day, you can't challenge power unless you're on the ballot. So I was very excited about us kind of converging on the ballot in 51 states, that is counting DC as a state, that we would really run an unstoppable, time-urgent campaign. And because the Greens have done this many times, and in our 2016 race, we were on the ballot for about 95% of voters in 47 states. We know how to do this. We've done it before. We have the culture of challenging power and using the ballot and our democratic rights, small d democratic, to do that. And when Dr. West decided that, in his words, he wanted to speak directly to the voters, did not want to have to go through the administrative red tape and stuff that goes with a party. He hadn't previously been a member of the party, so I can't blame him one bit. It's very hard to suddenly plunge into party politics, especially in the middle of a campaign, especially a high-pressured, a total pressure cooker of a campaign like a presidential race. So I totally understand why that was a very difficult fit. So it didn't work out, and he's continued on, which I think is great. His voice is very important, but at the end of the day, he's going to have a very hard time actually challenging power. The Greens have about $4 million worth of ballot lines at this point. We have another $1 million worth to go, but we're very close. And we have most of the really tough states already done and behind us. And we have a very strong tradition of fighting these battles as Greens in the various states, including the ones where we still have work to do. So I think it's extremely likely, it's a virtual certainty, that we are going to be on the ballot and challenging power. The other independent candidates, it's a big question right now whether they will be able to raise the money and jump through the hoops that the system as it's currently set up requires you to do. So there are wonderful candidates, and we have much common cause with them, and I hope we have lots of opportunities to collaborate. But at the end of the day, we're quite confident that we're going to be on the ballot. And the other independent candidates, it's not clear at all at this point. And, especially for, RFK has a big apparatus derived from his family name, essentially, and from his traditional Democratic Party ties. So he has a lot of momentum. Will he be able to get on the ballot? It's still not certain. But for a newcomer who's really practicing a politics of integrity, as Dr. West does, it's very hard to see how he gets from here to there.
Okay,
So we want to fight this battle, in so many words. If we want to have a pro-worker, anti-war, climate emergency agenda front and center in this election and on the ballot across the nation contesting for power, we had to run. So I stepped up because I'm the one candidate who could do that in the short period of time that we had. And when Dr. West left the Greens, we had a very short time interval before we had to seek ballot access in California. And there were all kinds of hoops we had to jump through in order to do that really, really fast. So Ajamu Baraka and I had a big ongoing fight as to who was going to run. And I was trying to get him to run, and he was trying to get me to run, and he won. But it's not over because, we still have the VP to think about, and he's very involved. So this is a mutual run. It was a mutual decision. We put out a statement to the press at the time that Dr. West left the Green Party. And that's what we said. We're here to build a movement that can actually challenge power. And we've spent a couple decades learning how to do that, learning how to wield the power of the ballot line. And if we were to throw that away and not do that in this election, then decades worth of work would be done, and there would be no voice that's fighting for working people, for a climate we can survive in, and to end the empire that would be on the ballot. And if we're going to really challenge power, we've got to be on the ballot.
Okay, so one thing I want to point out is because I want to come back to the Cornel West thing in a second, but one thing I want to point out is your campaign platform. I just want to show this to people on JillStein2024.com. These are the key factors here: a just economy, and here you mention having an economic bill of rights, a living wage job, housing, food, healthcare, education, and more. Of course, you mentioned a real Green New Deal, as we would expect that with a Green Party platform, and also creating jobs through this Green New Deal jobs as well. There's also freedom, equality, and justice for all. And you talk about liberty, justice, and addressing systemic discrimination against women, Black and brown people, Indigenous people, immigrants, people with disabilities, and the LGBTQIA plus community and other marginalized groups. And there's peace and global human rights, where you talk about the military contractors, lobbyists, politicians, et cetera, international law. And you also mentioned apartheid, which is important at this point in time, considering what's happening in Gaza. And last but not least, real democracy to empower the people. We need to revive our democracy with the full spectrum of reforms to empower the people, including real choice on the ballot, because without freedom of choice in elections, there's no democracy. So one of the things that I noticed, and I've mentioned this to other candidates that are running for president that have come on to the show as well, and I also said this to Cornel West and Davi, et cetera, because we're in this society now where a lot of people just have limited span of attention, so to speak. One of the things that I did recommend to them is I feel like bullet points are more efficient, just so people, particularly I think a lot of us that are millennials and Gen Z, we're less likely to read through paragraphs. And whereas if you just have bullet points, we just go 1, 2, 3, 4, bam, 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 that really helps us a lot. And the other thing that I would mention is details. So like, for example, when you say the right to have a living wage job, what do you think a living wage should be in the United States today? So these are just some of the things that I did notice in reference to the platform. And I know your website just started, so things could change or whatever. You could be still working on it. But that is one thing that I've heard back from viewers on Call-In, other presidential candidates that I've interviewed. They want to know, they just want to be able to go to the website and see the issues just listed out And more specifically, like when you talk about freedom, equality, and justice for all, like what does that include? So for example, would that include like reparations, particularly cash reparations for those that are American or African-American descendants of slavery, et cetera? So I think those are the kind of things that some people are looking for. And I just wanted to get your perspective about that.
So we're on exactly the same page here. And reparations, by the way, has always been a part of our campaigns and green campaigns, starting with, I think it was 2012, when our national campaign first put it on national, on the national stage, really. So absolutely. And you'll notice that our website does not say platform. It's not a platform. It's only principles. So it's just kind of a framework of the basic values. And we are working on that platform and hope to have it up in the next couple of weeks, maybe 2, maybe 3, can't say exactly, but we are working fast and furious to get it up as soon as possible. And I think our format is, in fact, bullets, because I agree with you. It's just much easier to digest.
Okay, another thing I have for you, Jill, is that, things have changed since Bernie suspended his campaign in 2020. I think a lot of us that are leftists, that feel like we were betrayed by Bernie Sanders and members of the squad. There is a segment of the leftist population that at this point in time, they're not as willing to try electoral politics, at least on a national level at all, because they feel like it's corrupt. We've talked about the corruption before, but they feel like because we were betrayed by people like Bernie and the squad. But then there is the other section of the left that does want to participate, but only in third party or independent races on the national level. What would your campaign do to win over those groups of leftists that maybe came from that Bernie movement, maybe some of them that supported you in 2016, that are just reluctant to participate in electoral politics on a national level at all because of what has happened with Bernie and the squad? How would you win over those voters?
I'd say that it hasn't been a problem in the past. Once the campaign actually gets going and we are out there doing a really hard-hitting, on the ground, frontline communities, grassroots campaign. And that's what we've always done. And that's what we will be starting to do very soon. And I think, people really want, I don't want to say hope, because hope doesn't do it. People really want to feel empowered and they want to feel lifted up. And that's the job, in my view, of any campaign, is to lift up the social movements, to give them a voice, to put them front and center, and, to build a common cause. And I think absolutely you'd be nuts to vote for the parties that have betrayed you and the people that have betrayed you. And I'm glad to say that's never been any campaign that I've been involved in, or anyone who's been a part of these campaigns. So, I don't think people have to jump suddenly because a new campaign has announced. I think, for people who don't have a relationship with us and who really want to see us prove our worth, I have no question that that's going to be proven across the board, starting soon.
For this particular campaign, are you going to be working with the same campaign advisors that you had in 2016, or are you starting completely new with a new team, new perspective?
So there are some people who've been a part of the team for a long time. I'd say most of the team is new since 2016, and it's a really great and exciting team. And I'd say hold on to your hat, and you're going to see some really great stuff starting soon.
Okay.
In fact, I'd say starting already, because what we put out by way of the 2 video statements that we've done, I think gives you a flavor for what we're about and what we're fighting for.
So this is going back to the Cornel West situation. Like, obviously, I want to address the elephant in the room. A lot of us did see you were a part of the team that brought Cornel West over to the Green Party. I think a lot of us got really excited when he was running as a Green, because we knew that you guys did have experience running presidential campaigns. And then there's also the ballot access perspective to that as well. And then, as we all know, you were also the one that recommended Peter Dow to work with Cornel West's campaign. Ultimately, though, the decision did come down to Dr. Westlake deciding whether or not to hire Peter. But then later on, we did see that Dr. West decided to leave the Green Party. I talked to him about that. I talked to you about that. Both of you came onto the show to discuss it. And then not too long after that, Peter Dow did decide to resign from the Cornel West campaign. Some people, since the announcement of your presidential campaign, some people are now wondering if your decision to choose Peter Dow to work with Dr. West's campaign was in an effort to sabotage the campaign. Now, this isn't necessarily what I believe, but these are just some of the things that have come my way before this interview. And I want to get your take on that, because the way that the events have unfolded, it does give some people that perspective that, well, maybe this was just to sabotage Dr. West. So I want to hear your take on that.
So the facts speak for themselves. I introduced Peter Dow, who's a friend and has been a friend and collaborator for years with many people in the Green Party. And I introduced him to Dr. West and his team very early in the campaign, because I did not want to be a campaign manager, but I felt like we couldn't leave Dr. West without a team. We had persuaded him to come on board, and now he didn't have a team. So, I sort of was cornered into being a campaign manager for a while. And I introduced them to Peter because he was one of the few people with experience on a national level who was willing to share that experience with independents and Greens, because people who want to protect their relationship to power don't do that, because you will be blacklisted forever and your career is over the minute you do that. And Peter is one of the few people who has been sharing campaign management skills with Greens for a while. So I thought it was really important for the Wests to know about him. But truth to tell, I did not recommend that Peter take any position in particular, or that they even hire him. What I did was introduce him. And so for people to say that like there was some kind of conspiracy that brought him in, that's ridiculous, because it was me that brought him to the Wests. And if you think I'm the Democratic Party, well, heaven help us. So I introduced him, and they kind of didn't exactly hit it off great. And that was the end of it for 3 months. And then suddenly they called Peter to say, would you? And they were doing their own search. They have plenty of connections to the Democratic Party and the Bernie campaign and all that. They were doing their own search, and they couldn't find anybody. I don't know what was going on there, because I was not privy to that. I don't know if they found people they liked and they were turning them down, or if they just didn't find people that they liked. But for one reason or another, they didn't come up with anybody. And then suddenly 3 months later, they decided on their own free will, without any input from me and without any input from Peter Dow, they decided they were going to hire him. So that's how that happened. And I had basically stepped away from that campaign and was kind of progressively doing so. I was no longer acting campaign manager. And then I was playing a less and less active role, because it was just clear to me that it was not, sort of the kind of concerted team party approach that I was accustomed to and had expected. So I was kind of moving to the outskirts of the campaign. And then I heard, I wasn't consulted, I heard that they were going to leave, and Peter was leaving along with Dr. West. And my understanding is that Dr. West, he is his own person, and he makes up his own mind, and he might tell you about it in advance, or he might not. And generally the way things worked was that we would hear about decisions after they were made. And Dr. West is making them based on his own kind of moral compass. and he's got a very strong moral compass. So far be it from me to challenge his decisions. But that's how decisions were made, and I expect that's how this decision got made. And that was that. And once they left the Greens and I left that campaign, Ajamu and I, at the same time, we got to work to ensure that we were not going to let our challenge to empire and oligarchy fall through the cracks. So that's how it happened. It really had, I don't see Peter Dow as having been the prime mover here in anything. That's not how Dr. West works. Dr. West is in full possession of his faculties, and he makes, his very principled assessment of the situation. He consults his family, who's very important to him and are his closest advisors, and he makes decisions. And I think he is, he is a powerful and courageous voice, however he chooses to participate in this election.
Yes. And for those who are not aware, to be fair, Dr. West did come on and talk about that and did say that this was his decision. I think one question that I do have, though, is that I know that there aren't many people that have this experience that are willing to manage like third party or independent campaigns. I totally understand that. But I think that the Green Party in the past has found people that are able to do that. So, for example, your campaign manager now, or your campaign managers that you've had before, could you explain to people the difference between the type of campaign manager that you had and what the West campaign was looking for, just so people understand? Because what people are going to hear is, well, we heard that there weren't many people that were available for this job that knew how to do this job. So in comes Peter Dow. But we also know that the Green Party has ran presidential campaigns before, and Peter Dow was not a part of that equation. Could you explain the difference between a campaign manager for your particular campaign in the Green Party versus maybe what Cornel West was looking for?
So first, I want to really honor the staff that we've had in the past who've had to learn, from the grassroots up. And there's a whole body of knowledge that generally does not cross over from the high-powered national campaigns, the 30, 50, $100 million campaigns. They have a whole other set of skills and resources that they use, especially for digital organizing. And as Greens, it's been very hard to learn those skills, but people are learning them. And, back, what is it now? I don't know, 6 months ago, whatever, I could not find anyone who had a handle on kind of the latest expanse of digital techniques that I thought would be a good fit with the chemistry of the West campaign. And let me say, it's a whole different ball game when you're working on your own campaign than when you're trying to help somebody else and figure it out. So I brought in everyone I could think of that I thought would be worth their considering. And there were others besides Peter Dow that I also brought to them. I brought to them, for example, Dimitri Lascaris. I don't know if you know him. He's a Green in Canada who is, you could say, second in the leadership of the Canadian Party and has challenged the old school Greens of the Canadian Green Party and has been doing really a great job. And he has run, his own campaign and managed other parliamentary campaigns. I can't even remember how far that got, but it became clear that just wasn't, the chemistry wasn't right there, and he didn't have enough knowledge of how things work here in the US. Mm-hmm. I think I think this is really inside baseball and not where we need to be spending a lot of time, kind of these boring details of how you make administrative decisions in campaigns. Get involved with one if you dare. It's like the least interesting part of campaigns. And there's sort of a whole discipline and study that goes with it. And it's not intuitive. It's not logical. A lot has to do with what you've done before and how you've done. We had many managers in my last campaign, It was too big a campaign for any of us. We had not had experience at that level. So we were always kind of chasing our tail, and we were always trying to keep up with things that we had never had to deal with before. And, it's even more true now. And it was with Dr. West's campaign, and it is now for our campaign. But by hook or by crook, we've managed to put together an incredible team. And we brought on people that I hadn't worked with before. And knock on wood, it's going really well. And we have not been knocking our heads against those limits as of yet. And I have a great deal of trust and excitement about our current team.
Awesome. Yeah, I asked these questions because people are more hesitant nowadays than they were 2020 Bernie campaign, 2016 your campaign, and the 2016 Bernie campaign. People are more hesitant now and more reluctant now because of everything that happened with like Bernie Sanders and the squad. But I guess one other question.
Let me just say, if I can say, that's been going on forever. I mean, the Democratic Party has been playing dirty politics as far back as I can remember. And you can look at, for example, how they sabotaged their own peace candidate. The peace community managed to ram a peace candidate through the Democratic Party process. McGovern, I think it was, way back in the 60s, and he was absolutely sabotaged. And there have been reasons for people to feel absolutely betrayed and sabotaged by the parties of Wall Street and the war machine forever. And each generation kind of comes to this, this rude awakening by the latest experience. But there's nothing new here. This is how the empire works. And we cannot allow its treachery to undermine our own struggle for power. It's very important that we struggle for power, regardless of what they do. And it's unfortunate that people get sweet-talked into supporting them in the first place. And I have to say Greens do not do that. The Greens who buy into the lesser evil mythology have long since left the Greens. They're just not part of this movement anymore. We have a thick skin and we contest for power and we get sabotaged for it. You can go all the way back to the Free Soil Party, I think it was, the first abolition parties that were called spoilers and were smeared and sabotaged. And that's the way this business works. And power is going to pull out all the stops to sabotage its competition. That will continue happening. And the sooner people, step up to the defiant movement that we have to be. And I would encourage people, find your niche wherever it is, whether it is the social movements or electoral politics. I personally think they're both essential. One cannot substitute for the other. And I've seen them both get tricked and sidelined. So, there has to be a tag team approach in my mind. And I wouldn't let the betrayals by the mainstream parties, by the parties of war on Wall Street, don't let their shit, influence what you're doing inside of our movement. Our movement is different. It has to be.
Yes, I've definitely seen that in organizing spaces as well. I've seen organizing spaces get infiltrated as well. So one question I do have in reference to the general election, this time around it's going to be different because in 2016, those of us that maybe were supporting Bernie, we knew that it was obvious the DNC by that point, they were not going to let Bernie Sanders have the nomination, right? So once a lot of people realized that, some people said, you know what, that's it. I'm going to vote for Jill Stein in the general election. And then there were some Bernie supporters that did give in and say, well, I'm going to vote for Hillary Clinton because I don't want Donald Trump, right? So there were people that went either way, and then some people just sat at home. This time around, though, what's going to be different is that we're looking at potentially yourself, Dr. West, and RFK Jr. in the general election. We have Joe Biden, who is polling terribly. He dropped 11 points in October just among Democratic voters alone. Of course, we have Donald Trump running again, who is still leading the Republican Party candidates. I think what some people have the question of is, if I'm on the left, now I feel like we're going to be splitting left votes between Dr. West and Jill Stein. And I want to hear how you feel about that, or is this just going to come down to primarily ballot access, in your opinion?
Yeah, totally. I think, I think there's very little daylight between Dr. West's agenda and priorities and ours. The difference is whether we have the capacity to get on the ballot. And so I would just say, hold on to your hat and let's see how it goes. I have no doubt that we are going to do at least as well as we did in 2016. And that means being on the ballot in just about every state. And I don't know whether Dr. West is on the ballot yet. It's going to be a very tough row to hoe. That's not to say his voice isn't extremely valuable, no matter what his ballot status is. His voice is powerful, courageous, and really charts a course, I think, for candidates and voters alike. But when it comes to casting your vote, you may not have all the choices that one would hope. So I'd say, let's see.
Right. I want to pivot to this point about Israel and Gaza.
And one other point, which is that there is always the potential for collaboration on the Green Party ticket.
I'm gonna come back to that because I have that later on. Israel and Gaza, along with your announcement video, you released another video that called for an investigation into the Biden administration, particularly about this issue. If you were president, along with calling into that investigation in reference to Joe Biden, if you were president, how would you handle this issue with Israel and Gaza right now? Would you call for a ceasefire? Would you call for the end of the occupation with the Palestinian people? And what would you do in reference to the U.S. government's relationship with Israel and sending arms to Israel as well?
Great question. This is really the question of the hour. And I think that the US of A needs to do the right thing. And we need to join the community of nations insisting on the application of international law. And it's shameful. We have been violating our own laws by providing aid and military assistance to a country which has been flagrantly violating human rights and international law for decades. And, especially with the blockade of Gaza for the last, 16 years, whatever, so, there's just no question. And then you can go back further to the issues of displacement and ethnic cleansing that goes way back. So it's really unfortunate that the US has basically given a blank check, not only the dollars that we've supplied, I think it's 160 billion, which tops all other aid given to other countries over the past many years. It's really unfortunate that we've given a blank check in dollars and we've given an ethical blank check and have basically been providing political cover for what is a horrific, flagrant violation of international law and seems to be now a clear-cut case of genocide taking place before our very eyes. And I think we must do everything in our power. And let's see, sorry, my camera cut out there for a second. Are you seeing me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I think that what is going on in Gaza is absolutely horrifying right now. The assault, the nonstop bombing for 30 plus days. This is potentially the worst bombing campaign that's ever been inflicted on any sector of the planet. The denial of food and water to the residents of Gaza, the denial of medical care, the attack on hospitals, the attack on the press, the attack on refugee centers and schools. It's just jaw-dropping. I think it's traumatizing just watching it. So one can only imagine what this means for the people of Gaza. And I have to say, this is also a disaster for the people of Israel, because it is alienating much of their support. It's a huge wake-up call to people who have been supporting the Netanyahu agenda, which is absolutely horrific. And this has poisoned the waters for Israel in the international community, and especially with its neighbors, where the Arab countries that had made peace arrangements and diplomatic arrangements, Jordan, Egypt, Bahrain, I mean, they've all now basically broken ties with Israel. And arguably many are now, contemplating becoming involved in the fight. And this is terrifying and puts us all at risk here. I mean, everybody in the Middle East, but it goes way beyond the Middle East. And we ourselves, the US has sent a nuclear submarine to the region. Now, few people, especially our reckless and irresponsible misleaders, understand what the risks of a nuclear submarine are. Very few people know that a nuclear submarine, just one of them, contains the equivalent of approximately 4,000 Hiroshima bombs. Imagine 4,000 Hiroshima bombs going off anywhere. Well, one of the things that means, and that's not to say that that's the most likely scenario, but this is a possible scenario. There's 4,000 Hiroshima bombs worth of ammunition sitting off the coast. If that were to be discharged, that spells nuclear winter sufficient to kill 1 out of every 3 residents of planet Earth. The firepower contained in one nuclear submarine is outrageous. It should not exist. It should not be brought to this tinderbox of a conflict in the first place. But this also underscores, how incredibly reckless and irresponsible and criminal our leaders are in this country to be introducing nuclear weapons into this struggle, let alone to be manufacturing nuclear submarines in the first place, which of course are being brought now to the conflict zones around China as well. So, to my mind, this underscores why the Israel-Gaza, it's not a conflict, it's an assault. The assault of Israel on Gaza is, it's a microcosm of what's wrong with empire and how empire really puts us all at risk right now, our lives, our health, our future. And in this struggle, I sort of feel like as Gaza goes, we all go, are we going to have the laws of nations, or are we going to have the law of the jungle? Which is going to prevail? And Israel has been given a blank check to apply the law of the jungle, but the US also uses the law of the jungle. I mean, how did we conduct our wars, in Iraq and so on, and we conveniently use the terms now instead of international law. The Biden administration talks about rules-based orders. Whose rules? Our rules that we can change day by day. That's called the law of the jungle, when your rules basically are self-serving and free-flowing. And, this puts us all at risk. We need to get back to, to the progress that was made following the catastrophe of the Second World War before we stumble our way. I shouldn't say we, and I shouldn't say stumble. I should say before the war profiteers push us. I mean, just look at the way we've transitioned from the war in Ukraine, which was suddenly it was so important to all of us, that we prosecute that war. And now suddenly we have a shiny new war. So forget that war. Let's fight this one instead. It's like what stronger demonstration is there that these wars really are being conducted for the benefit of the war predator industry? And, this is an endemic problem in the way the US government, the Congress, the presidency, and so on are determined and how they function. So, this is why we need a democratic revolution, a peaceful, small d democratic revolution, and standing up for human rights and international law in the Israel genocide against Gaza is part of not only Gaza's future, this is part of all of our future.
Jill, and I want to speak to the censorship issue around this particular topic as well. I don't know if you've seen this, but Bill Ackman has been on a roll here. For those who are not aware, Bill Ackman is a billionaire hedge fund manager. He's also one of the donors for RFK Jr.'s campaign. He posted this earlier today. What percentage of the student protesters who support Hamas are not U.S. citizens? Why do we want them taking the place of American citizens at our most prestigious universities? So he's criticizing MIT there. And to me, when I see this, this comes across to me as a dog whistle, taking the place of American citizens at our most prestigious universities. Obviously, these students, and I've worked at these schools, I've worked at MIT, I've worked at Harvard. Obviously, students are not endorsing Hamas. They're calling for an end of the occupation of the Palestinian people. But people like Bill Ackman, who does have a large following, particularly on Twitter, are very well known. Again, hedge fund billionaire. He's presenting this in such a way that it makes it seem like that is what these students are doing when that is not what they are doing. These are some of the same people that said we need to have free speech. And now all of a sudden, when you change the country in reference to Ukraine and you swap in Israel, all of a sudden, those same people like Bill Ackman and people like RFK Jr. are now wanting to censor students for having these protests in asking for the removal of the occupation of the Palestinian people. What do you say to that? The censorship issue around this? We just saw Rashida Tlaib was just censured in the House for advocating for her people. And you yourself, you are Jewish. I'm pretty sure you would not agree with the censure of Rashida Tlaib. How would you handle this particular situation where they're calling for the censorship of people who are trying to fight for Palestinian struggle?
So, I think it's really important to point out here that these are our basic values of democracy and human rights that are on the line right now. And people who are witnessing genocide in Gaza are broadly horrified. Even before the worst of these assaults was apparent, it was like 66% of the American public that was calling for a ceasefire, while it was only 3% of Congress. That tells you the incredible divide between people and our elected misleaders. I have not seen polls on the censorship, and people may be buying into that because it seems less dramatic and less harmful. But it's really important for us to stand up for basic civil rights and civil liberties, because it may be Palestinians today, or Palestinian human rights, but it will be, it could be anybody tomorrow. And I think both Glenn Greenwald and Brianna Joy Gray have been doing a really magnificent job of, just really digging in deep on what the stakes of this discussion are. And I think many Americans, will be reminded of the importance of our rights of free speech and our rights of protest and the rights of press freedom, and our rights to not be of privacy, our rights not to be surveilled. We are all at risk here in the violation. A militarized society is not just dangerous to our foreign enemies. The assault is them everyday people here at home. So we have to stand up to this authoritarian militarism, which is extremely anti-democratic. And it's very important that we stand up for the rights of free speech. I mean, if you can't have a debate about a war at a college, you know, what is a college for? What is an education for? So absolutely, you know, and it's so outrageous that an effort is being made right now to conflate anti-Zionism or opposition to the Israeli government's assault. You know, you don't even have to talk about Zionism at this point. Let's just look at this war and this genocide that's happening before our very eyes. To object to that is not anti-Semitism. The two have absolutely nothing to do with each other. And, you know, Democracy Now! Recently featured an 87-year-old woman who was a victim and whose family was a victim of the Holocaust, who's been out there advocating, just beautiful, because she went through the same thing. You know, she went through, I think for her, it was like 11 days of bombing straight in Germany, where I think she was in hiding at the time. She didn't have access to the tunnels during the bombing, which was going on by it was being conducted by the US and the UK at the time, nonstop, 24 hours a day for like 11 days. And, you know, and they were also dropping white phosphorus and people were being lit up like candles, as she described it. It's just like unbelievable, the horror. She's been through the horror as a Jew fleeing, the Nazi persecution and Holocaust as a child, as a 7-year-old. And, you know, to hear it in her words, it's so compelling. And then for her to talk about how let us not, you know, inflict on others what was done to us. You know, it's like sort of the basic golden rule. Let's do unto others here. If we can't do that, you know, how do we ever move forward? You know, how do we ever get past our conflicts? You know, in the words of Gandhi, it's an eye for an eye until we're all blind. And what we're seeing happen here is not an eye for an eye. It's like hundreds of eyes for an eye. It's just horrifying. This is not how we're going to have a livable world, especially in the presence of nuclear weapons. You know, we are heading straight into the mushroom cloud here, you know, if we cannot get a grip and invoke our higher selves to a higher humanity, which is what we've got. That's the route we've got to go.
You know, I was at one of the protests here in Boston, and one of the speakers was from the Steelworkers Union. And he was very, very vocal speaker. And he said during his speech that they always stood in solidarity with the Palestinian struggle. And that got me to thinking about the worker unions and also worker co-ops. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, with your campaign this time around, would you be interested in collaborating with any of the unions or people who are trying to unionize, and those that are interested in starting worker co-ops as well? For example, Professor Richard Wolff, he talks about worker co-ops quite often. Shama Sawant has Workers Strike Back, so she's been trying to unionize or help unionize workers across the country. Do you see any opportunity for that to be implemented as part of your campaign?
Absolutely, because one of our, you know, kind of the three pillars of our campaign, crushing inequality, endless war, and climate collapse. And then, you know, democracy is kind of the overarching issue there. But, you know, each of those issues is a very central focus, and they're all interdependent. You know, we're not going to solve one of them unless we're also solving the others. And so, you know, in terms of, you know, what role does, worker empowerment, strong unions, co-ops, what does that play? It's a huge role, and it's always been a huge part of our campaigns. It's a key part of the Green New Deal. In fact, even going back as far as 2012, we called for an entire federal agency to support cooperative development as an alternative to, you know, to sort of the current paradigm. And we need to support it, you know, not only network with those that exist, but we need really better institutional support so that we can move the economy in a much more sound and just direction that empowers workers 24 hours a day, you know, not just when you cast a vote or something like that. You know, the workplace needs to be a place of empowerment for workers. Absolutely. Very excited to get going on that.
And that takes me back to the pandemic. I was thinking about some of the people, particularly here in Massachusetts, because Massachusetts is one of the states that was locked down. I'm thinking about some of the people that lost their businesses, the small businesses that had to close permanently here in Massachusetts because of the lockdowns. I think about people that lost their jobs here because of that as well. And one of the questions that has come up a couple of times, I talked to Green Party members on the show about this before. There was a statement that was issued by the Green Party about the mandates. And then the Black Caucus of the Green Party came forward with their own statement where they were actually not in support of mandating, we call the jab on the show, Jill, mandating the jab for people in order to, maintain their job, et cetera. What is your position about that particular issue? And if we were to face another pandemic in the future, where would you stand in reference to locking down states or mandates, et cetera?
So, I'm not favorably disposed towards mandates as a rule. And, until COVID, the sort of accepted public health approach was not pro-mandate. It was that you need to have regulatory agencies that people trust, and that that people are willing to be guided by. And you want to be in a situation where you're not forcing medical treatments on people, which is a horrible idea from the get-go. And in the many decades preceding this, that was just assumed that our regulatory agencies had respect and support. Now, our regulatory agencies have been very subject to corporate capture. And, you can look at, for example, the opioid crisis and the permissions that were written actually by the Sackler family themselves that enabled opioids to be marketed the way that they were. So this was a clear-cut case of corporate capture. Or you may recall there was a medication called Vioxx, which was a so-called NSAID, a nonsteroidal like naproxen or ibuprofen, something like that. This was like another version of that. It caused something like 28,000 heart attacks, which the FDA knew about and which they were suppressing before it was taken off the market. And the guy who was the whistleblower, they tried to expose and, marginalize. So that was another case of corporate capture. And unfortunately, it's not, or look at kind of the revolving door between like Monsanto and the FDA. Michael Taylor, I think it was, who had a high position in the FDA, and then he would kind of move back and forth between the FDA and high corporate positions in Monsanto. We need to shut down the revolving door. We need to create publicly funded elections and get big money out of the business of strangling our electoral system. That needs to happen in and of its own right. And one of the benefits of that is that people can then again begin to trust our agencies. Not that they should ever have a blank check. I mean, agencies should always be required to explain themselves, but they wouldn't kind of come with this cloak of corruption that surrounds them now. And I think we have to get down to some basic principles here so that our society works. As a medical doctor, when the COVID stuff first started happening and members of my family who are healthcare providers were very much on the front lines, I took several weeks out and I just read the literature, and I became very convinced on the basis of longstanding studies that they were far better off, that people who were at high risk for exposure were far better off getting vaccinated than not. And that was my recommendation to them. But of course, they didn't need my recommendation. They were making their own decisions. But I rested very easy with that and made kind of my own decisions about being vaccinated. But I'll tell you, the tradition of medicine that I was trained in, I'm kind of old school. The tradition of medicine I'm trained in is that you review the data. You review the data yourself and you get comfortable with it, especially for new things. I had one medical director who said, never be the first person to adopt a new medication and never be the last one either. You know, you can look at some of the like simplest, most basic treatments, and they are changing all the time. So it's not like this is always kind of nefarious influence peddling. There's just a lot of discovery that happens, and it kind of happens willy-nilly, and you get one good study and then it will replace another good study. So you have to be constantly reevaluating this stuff. And it's very hard to do if you don't do this full time and have a whole lot of expertise, which is why we need agencies that we can trust that can be, you know, reviewing this data constantly, which is the way it has to be, you know. And we need to have research which is sponsored by a non-partisan public interest that's not sponsored by pharmaceutical companies who have a stake in the outcome. You know, we just have to go back to basic principles here and do the science right.
All right, Jill, I have 2 more questions for you. What would be the plan, I think, particularly with your campaign, because you can't speak for the entire Green Party, obviously, but with your campaign, one of the issues that has been raised with the Green Party before from other people I've interviewed on the show is that they feel like the Green Party needs to find a way to expand its base to appeal to African-American voters in the United States, because the Democratic Party has a stronghold on the African-American community, although things have been changing recently this year where more African-Americans are leaving the Democratic Party. But what do you think you could do in reference to your campaign to change that, to bring more African-Americans over to the Green Party or just the third party in general, and to get people to realize that you're not really winning anything by supporting this 2-party system?
Yeah, well, I think the 2-party system is making a great case for doing that itself right now, you know, and that's really great. And we're seeing that. I mean, unfortunately, we're seeing people of color support Trump and the Republicans, you know, so it's really important that we get the word out that there are other options, you know, and the worst case scenario, you know, they don't have to rush to the worst case scenario here, you know, that is supporting Trump or supporting Republicans. Not that that's worse than the Democrats. I mean, in my view, they're different kinds of worse. I don't think there is a lesser evil right now. I think there is a greater good, you know, and that's what we represent in the Green Party. And people need to start prioritizing the greater good and stepping up to a future that actually works for us all. In 2016, you know, Ajamu Baraka and I had a very grassroots frontlines community campaign, and we were able to really reach out to African-American voters. After our race, you know, there was just not good stuff that happened inside the Green Party. And looking back on it myself, I wonder how much, you know, interference, purposeful interference that was going on, because there was quite a bit of it. And I think we have to be prepared for that in advance and be prepared to actually defend our gains in this next race and to continue moving forward. And I think now we have a much better sense of how to do that if there is some kind of infiltration and sabotage going on. But you know, in terms of like how to work the election, I think we know how to do that. And we did that in 2016. And my presumption is that I'm going to be running with a running mate, you know, from the community of color, and that we're going to have a very exciting journey ahead.
So that brings me to my final question. A lot of people are trying to guess or speculate who your running mate could be. If I had to guess, I would assume maybe Ajamu. Other people that have been mentioned have been Margaret Kimberly, although I don't even know if Margaret Kimberly wants to be a politician, but her name has been thrown that way. And then last but not least, like when you talked about collaborating, one of the big pushes that are coming from people via email to me is, why don't Jill Stein and Cornel West actually collaborate together? So I wanted to get your take on that.
I could see that. I could totally see that. And, you know, I could see that from the minute that Cornel went off to do a different kind of race it was kind of in my mind like, oh, that's what a VP does. They don't have to worry about the party dynamics and that kind of stuff. They're just off and talking to the voters. And that's kind of what Cornel wants to do here. So yeah, I would say it's definitely, it's an open book right now. And, and again, I want to affirm Cornel's race in and of its own right and, support it and support the importance of it. I feel like our campaign right now is running in the lane that he cleared. He really did a lot of work to clear this lane. And I am very grateful to him for, having been there in a really courageous way to assert our right to people-powered choices. And he continues to do that. And that's great. And could we be doing it together at some point? Way back in 2016, I had tried to get Cornel to run as a VP.
I did not know that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, I had really worked on him, and Chris Hedges was helping us, and he did not want to be a candidate at the time.
Wow. Interesting. Well, I sincerely hope, I wish you the best, Jill. I will say, I do think next year, I think some people are more excited going into it, this particular presidential race, because I do think, again, based on what I've seen just from the polls so far, and I know it's still early, I do think next year could be that chance for third party independent races to cause some type of friction in the duopoly.
Yeah, totally. Really looking forward to it. And I encourage people, go visit us at jillstein2024.com and join the team.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on, Jill.
Thank you so much, Sabby. Good to talk.
Bye. All right, guys. Interesting. Yeah, I did not know that that there was an interest in Cornel West in 2016, but that's interesting to hear. I got to tell you guys, I really do feel like next year, if we're going to cause some type of ripple or whatever within the duopoly, I feel like next year is probably our best shot, at least that we've had since I've been able to vote. I don't know. If you guys remember another time, let me know, but I could see that being a possibility. Let me go ahead and go to that comment on Rockfin, and then I'll pick up the ones on YouTube. Thanks so much, Eric. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. If Greens want more Greens in Congress, then maybe they should consider prioritizing running CBIs to create the infrastructure needed so that can happen. What they've been doing for the past 20 years hasn't worked. Maybe they should think about taking another tactic. If they are serious about policy, they should be prioritizing the public interest over the party interest and get these as state policies. That's an interesting point, Roger. And thank you for the tip, Kay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Hemp Car, for this tip. Navy.mil said they'll power their fleet on seawater, waiting for Stein to debate Diane Sayre. Oh, that would be a good debate. Thank you so much for that. Let me go to some of these comments here. Thank you for the super chat, Gray. Couldn't help but think that no matter who won 2016/2020, Hillary's second term, Trump second, or Bernie first or second, all would have handled Israel/Palestine similarly. I could see that. That's a good point, Gray. Thank you, Scott. Does Jill support signing the Treaty of Prohibition of Nukes? I feel like leftists disregard this important issue, and the USA should be leading the way. #security through peace. Based on what she was saying about nuclear weapons, she probably does. Thank you, Yin Yang. I think Dr. Jill Stein wants to be president very badly, like more badly than any other candidate out there. That's why I think she is running. Thank you for that. Thank you, Baby Ethernet. Your critical questions are phenomenal, Sabby. Thank you, Baby Ethernet. Thank you, Helpful Harm. That's an interesting name. Dr. West and Claudia De La Cruz have been at the front line and leading many protests and rallies in the past few months. Just a reminder, love, join PSL, guys. Thank you. Thank you, Nayan. Is there any precedent for the Green Party USA to sue the Democratic Party for nominating war criminals? I do not know. So I'm just going to say not that I know of, but I would have to look that up, look into that. That's interesting. And thank you, Victor. all candidates are warmongers. Whoever you vote and put them into office, they all answer to the American war machine. Well, someone has to hold those positions, Victor. I see where you're coming from, though. Thank you, Kenneth. I love Jill. I love Sabby. Thank you. Does Jill have a plan to prevent being handcuffed again, preventing her from participating in debates? Well, you know what should be interesting this time around? Again, I think because there are so many, there's multiple third-party and independent candidates that are running outside the duopoly, and they're getting more attention from the media than I've seen before. That may not even be an issue. Remember, 5% to get the federal funding, 15%, and then you're on the debate stage. So if we're just looking at the polls right now, that means that RFK would already be on the debate stage. So I think like if Jill can get to that 15%, then she wouldn't even have to deal with that issue. But the other thing I would add is cops gonna cop. You know how it is. So cops are gonna. Thank you for the super chat, Landrew. Thank you so much. Thank you for speaking truth, Dr. Stein. I'm on board if you commit to staying to the end, which Green Party candidates typically do, as long as I can remember. Thank you, Derek. Does she agree that African Americans should receive lineage-based reparations for slavery in this country? So I did ask her about reparations earlier on. She said they do agree with that. Plus, that's also a part of the Green Party platform, just FYI. Thank you for the super sticker, Lee. Thank you so much. And thank you again, Baby Ethernet. Cornell should join Jill. That would be powerful. That would be a powerful campaign, huh? And shout out to Joey Peltier for being a Sabby member for 4 months. I think 2028 after 2027 general strike will be a good year. Unfortunately, that is another 4 years of Trump to get the white liberals off the couch. Ouch, Joey, ouch. If you have not had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button, guys. Thank you so much. That helps me out with the algo. And thank you so much for hanging out with me on this interesting Sunday. We're now going to our next story here. Speaking of presidential elections for 2024, there are still other people that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party would like to see run. And there is one person in particular that both parties have apparently spoken to. Can you guess who it is? We're going to get started with this interview here with Stephen A. Smith on CNN. So if you are not familiar with Stephen A. Smith, let me tell you who he is. I watch a lot of sports, so I've known about Stephen for a while. Stephen A. Smith is a sports commentator. Some of you may know him from the sports show on ESPN called First Take. That's how I first came to know of him. He also has a podcast as well on YouTube, and I also believe this is on Apple Podcast as well. Anyway, Stephen's all over the place. Stephen's not everyone's cup of tea. Some people like the fact that Stephen is tends to be pretty loud and in your face. And some people do not like that, right? So he's not everyone's cup of tea. But what I found very interesting is that CNN actually was interviewing Stephen A. Smith, sports commentator, about his opinion about who should run for president for 2024 and about Joe Biden. It's interesting because there are commentators, left independent media commentators, that I feel have been blackballed from networks like CNN just simply because of the fact that they were part of Bernie Sanders' campaign. I don't see them inviting on people like Brianna Joy Gray to ask her questions and pick her brain about the 2024 presidential election. I don't see them inviting on people like Glenn Greenwald, who I also feel has been blackballed in spaces like CNN. So it's really interesting to me that they're going to sports commentators to get their opinions. Pay attention to what's happening here, folks. Let's dive in.
So one of the interesting things that this has produced is really a lot of Hail Marys, it seems, of people saying this person should run, that person should run. One of them this week was Dwayne Johnson saying that he was contacted about a possible Biden run for president. Listen, or a possible run for president. Listen to what he said.
Right. In 2022, I got a visit from the parties asking me if I was going to run and if I could run.
Wow.
And it was a big deal, and it came out of the blue.
Wow.
And it was one after the other. I was moved by that, and the reason why I had given that response, if that's truly what the people want, then of course I will consider it, And after that response, that's when the parties came.
Let me pause right there. So you guys see what's happening? Both parties, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, reached out to Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson to ask him to run for president for 2024. So this is interesting, especially considering that The Rock partnered with Oprah Winfrey recently for that Maui fund. You guys know that I heavily criticized that, not because they were trying to raise money for people, but because I told you that you could just donate to people in Maui directly through their GoFundMes or through Venmo instead of some fund that Oprah and The Rock created and said they had to get to a certain dollar amount in order to dish the money out to the people. It didn't make any sense to me. And there was also a nonprofit attached to it, etc. And now we see that both parties apparently are trying to get The Rock to run. But how do they feel about this? Listen to this. This is the funny part.
I mean, look, he's a popular guy, but what do you make of just the idea that, I mean, according to this, real people in politics have approached him and said, you should consider this?
Well, first of all, real people in politics have approached me and talked to me about running. It ain't happening. I'm not interested. Let me get that out of the way.
Running for president?
But let's understand, it running for president, it speaks to the level of desperation that exists in this country, Abby. That's really what's going on here. It's not about Dwayne "Rock" Johnson. It's an indictment against the presumed candidates for the 2024 election. Like you pointed out at the top of your show, you've got one former president that without question, I mean, Boo-Boo the Fool knows, he will engage in a campaign of vengeance if he is the president of the United States again. He will not rest until he gets back at everybody who's gotten at him. That's his MO. In the case
So he's talking about Donald Trump here, and then he pivots to Joe Biden.
of Biden, we're seeing somebody that just doesn't seem lucid and confident enough to be on that position 4 years from now. Maybe at this moment, yes, but do you have the confidence that he can do what you need him to do and run in this country for 4 years, starting in 2024 when he's 82 years old? The answer is absolutely not. So
Let me pause there for a second because I want you to pay attention to something that Stephen A. Smith did. He's still giving Joe Biden credit, even though it sounds like he's not giving Joe Biden credit. And let me explain. He said he doesn't think that Joe Biden is competent enough to lead this country for another 4 years. But he says that right now he's okay, but not 4 years from now. So what I'm trying to show you is that Stephen A. Smith is still giving Joe Biden credit, saying that Joe Biden is competent right now to do what he's doing. And I don't think that Joe Biden's competent right now. And I'm not even going into the next 4 years yet. I don't think Joe Biden is competent to lead this country right now. And I want to tell you, this is why I think they are interviewing someone like Stephen A. Smith instead of someone like a Glenn Greenwald, instead of someone like a Breonna Joy Gray, who has more experience in this political arena. And that is because they would probably tell you what I just said, that Joe Biden is not competent, is not fit to lead the country right now. You see, you don't get invited onto these shows without being somewhat a part of the status quo. You just don't. This is why you don't see the people that were part of that Bernie movement, with the exception of Nina Turner. They'll bring her on every now and then. But for the most part, you don't see most of these people that were part of the Bernie Sanders movement invited back onto those shows. You don't see them invited back onto CNN. You don't see them invited back onto MSNBC. They want to try to bury and hide those people as much as possible because they never want that rhetoric to come back up again, because they still blame those supporters for the reason why people like Donald Trump won. So pay attention to that. Now we're going to go back. We're going to let him finish what he's saying here, because the people that he actually offers don't make any sense either.
82 years old. The answer is absolutely not. So guess what? If you want to ask me or anybody else, Dwayne "Rock" Johnson, yeah, I'd vote for him before I voted for one of those two. I mean, you got Marianne Williamson that wants to run. She's not going to get any votes.
Let's pause for a second. Let's go back again to where he says Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, because I'm going to show you something here.
In 2024, when he's 82 years old, the answer is absolutely not. So guess what? If you want to ask me or anybody else, Dwayne "Rock" Johnson, yeah, I'd vote for him before I.
He would vote for The Rock before he voted for Biden or Donald Trump. Okay. Vote for The Rock based on what, though? What are The Rock's policies? Or what does he believe in? How does he feel about the economy? How does The Rock feel on healthcare? How does he feel about militarism in the United States and abroad? How does he feel about foreign policy? Where does he stand on this position with Israel and Gaza? How does he feel about the war in Ukraine? No, Stephen A. Smith just voting on thoughts and feelings. Do you see how this works, ladies and gentlemen? Okay. Thoughts and feelings.
What? If you want to ask me or anybody else, Dwayne Rock Johnson, yeah, I'd vote for him before I voted for one of those two. I mean, you got Marianne Williamson that wants to run. She's not going to get any votes. Yeah, she backed out of the 2020 presidential campaign before even people had a chance to vote.
Would you vote for a third party?
All right. So he says that Marianne Williamson is not going to get any votes. Now, Marianne Williamson is running in the Democratic Party, so she's still a part of the Democrat primary. I wouldn't say she's not going to get any votes. If she's still in this campaign through the primaries, she'll get some votes. If she stays, and she'll get some votes in reference to the primary. Marianne Williamson just increased in the polls, guys. This is something I don't think everybody's paying attention to. Marianne Williamson is now at 13% in the Democrat primary polls. She has increased since this issue, this war broke out with Israel and Gaza. And a lot of people haven't been paying attention to that. So I wouldn't go as far as to say she's not going to get any votes. Some people are going to vote for Marianne. Is she going to get the DNC nomination? I would say no. But that's the difference between bringing on someone like Stephen A. Smith, a sports commentator, and bringing on someone who's a part of the political space that they can explain it the way that I just explained it to you. There's a difference between those two. And that's why this is what I'm saying. Stephen is there to keep the status quo. Stephen is there to say Marianne is not going to get any votes, so that you don't even think about voting for someone else in the Democratic Party but Joe Biden. Think about that. See, I know how this game is played. Now they go into the third party conversation. Listen to this.
Out of the 2020 presidential campaign before even people had a chance to vote.
Would you vote for a third party? Would you vote for an alternative, a third party candidate over Trump or Biden?
I would say this to you. The only reason I wouldn't is if you told me definitively that I was throwing my vote away because it would facilitate one or the other winning. But if you...
There you go right there. Ding, 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 ding. Now you see why he was invited on to CNN? You see that? That's the same message that comes from CNN and MSNBC. This is the same message that tell you, well, no, because I'll be throwing my vote away. That's why they would bring on Stephen A. Smith. Let me bring on another Black person, but not someone that's a part of the political space, not someone that knows what the hell they're talking about. Let me go bring on a Black sports commentator and ask him about this. And I'll bring up the third party subject so that the viewers who are watching this, and we have a Black female host as well, the viewers who are watching this, African Americans won't even think twice about supporting a third party or independent candidate. That's what this conversation is about. That's why Stephen A. Smith is on this show. That's exactly how this works, folks. They're not going to bring on someone who's going to say, like, for example, if they brought on Breonna Joy Gray would say, yes, I voted for Jill Stein in 2016. They're not going to bring her on. Let's bring on a sports commentator. So Stephen says you're throwing your vote away, but then listen to who he goes to recommend as well. Not just The Rock. Listen to this.
That I was throwing my vote away because it would facilitate one or the other winning. But if you told me that we had a three-party system that really, really worked, and you really, really stood a chance, and you can look at the candidates and how viable they are. Let's take Dwayne Johnson into consideration. Highly successful, brilliant, obviously incredibly imposing, heart of gold, in the right place, cares about what's in the best interest of America. Isn't that what we're looking for when we look for any president of the United States? You want a commander-in-chief that is interested in governing all the people, not just looking out for his constituents, to those who voted for him, and throwing everybody else by the wayside. You don't
Pause. See, Stephen A. Smith likes to talk for a long time. So I do want to go ahead and interrupt there. And I want to debunk two things that he just said in that short amount of time. Number one, so he talks about how, well, I would if there were a third party system actually in place. So this is another example that CNN and MSNBC also provide. It's another liberal talking point. You cannot vote third party or independent because we don't have the system in place and, you know, they're not actually going to win and da da da. As long as you keep doing that, you're never going to vote third party or independent, and we'll never build up third parties. We'll never build up an independent movement. Do you think RFK Jr. is sitting back there telling his supporters, don't support me now that I'm independent because we don't have the infrastructure? Hell no. He's campaigning all across this country. He's telling them to donate to the campaign. He's telling them we're going to get on this damn ballot and we're going to disrupt this duopoly. So think about this, people. If you keep doing the same thing, but you are expecting different results, that's crazy. We're never going to build any type of third-party infrastructure or any type of independent candidate infrastructure in this political system if we continue buying into what Stephen A. Smith just said, that we're throwing our vote away so we don't even vote for those candidates at all. The first step is the easiest step. Stop voting for the duopoly. That doesn't even cost you money. Think about that. The second point of his I want to debunk, he said that basically people like Joe Biden are catering to their constituents instead of trying to govern everybody. Everybody. So let's go ahead and debunk that. I would argue these politicians are not catering to their constituents. I would argue these politicians are catering to their donors, okay? See, this is what happens when you bring on someone who's not a part of the political sphere and you bring on someone who's a sports commentator. Those of us in this space, we know who the politicians actually cater towards. They don't cater to their constituents. That's why the constituents are so upset. That's why people get voted out. If Joe Biden was catering to his constituents, his polling numbers would be higher. Come on. How you sit there, you don't bring up the fact that the politicians are catering to corporate interests, corporate greed, Wall Street, the military industrial complex. You don't mention those things if you are already part of the status quo and you want to get invited back on CNN again to promote your podcast, or you don't understand how it works. Let's go on, because he's going to tell you again. Listen to who he recommends.
And throwing everybody else by the wayside. You don't want that. But which party has given us that? The fact of the matter is, you look at the Democrats and you see some of the stuff that they get caught in. I'm going to say it again. It is one of the most disgraceful things I have ever seen in the history of politics to be in the year 2023. And we're talking about liberals, progressives, relying and practically begging an 80-plus-year-old man to run for office again. That is disgraceful. Where are your other candidates? Gavin Newsom is somebody that I think he makes a very viable point on behalf of liberalism.
And that's the other reason why he was invited onto this segment. So now he's going to tell you, because he doesn't think that Joe Biden's a good idea, now he's going to tell you that Gavin Newsom is the one that should run. He's on there to promote and to recommend another status quo corporate Democrat in the system, someone who's already a part of the system. Gavin Newsom, he's the governor of California. Gavin Newsom has not been good for California. Come on, we're talking about a state in this country whose homelessness population continues to increase and outshine almost every state in this country. We're talking about a state that people have been leaving in droves because they can no longer afford to stay there. So people are leaving California and moving to Arizona and Texas and some all the way over to Florida. That's who you want to run the country? The guy who can't fix the homeless problem in California? The guy who's losing residents to other states because it's so expensive to live there? The guy who, by the way, is related to Nancy Pelosi, which they don't like to talk about this a lot. He's related to Nancy Pelosi by marriage. Is that what we want? We want more dynasties in this office? So you see how this goes? He starts off to make you think, oh yeah, I'm interested in, pushing someone who's on the outside like The Rock because he's not a politician. Don't know where The Rock stands on these policies and these principles. Then he pivots to, well, I'd vote third party if I knew I wasn't going to throw my vote away. And then he rolls right back into keeping you in the Democratic Party and saying Gavin Newsom is the one who should be running. And just like that, they trap Black people right back in the Democratic Party. That's why they brought Stephen A. Smith on this show. Gavin Newsom, another corporate goon.
Think that he would be a strong candidate on the left. Yeah. If you're Trump or you're a Trump supporter, okay, fine, you want to vote for him, that's cool under normal circumstances. You got people out here talking about how they vote for him for president even if he was in prison. That's how sick we are as a society right now.
I wouldn't say that's how sick we are as a society, Stephen. I would say that's how desperate the American people are. You don't have to be sick to support someone because they may be in prison or whatever. You're supporting that person because economically this country is failing. You're supporting that person because you're that desperate, especially if you're working class or you're poor. You want someone to come in and fix this issue with inflation. You want someone to come in and fix these grocery store prices. You want someone to come in and pay people more than $7.25 an hour. That's what this is about. But Stephen A. Smith is going to do what CNN typically does, and Fox News will do this, and MSNBC will do this. Let's shame the voters. How dare you? How dare you vote for someone like that? You're sick. It's always the voters' fault. It's never the politicians' fault. It's never the military-industrial complex fault. It's never the corporations' fault. It's never the real estate agent's fault. It's never BlackRock's fault. You follow me? It's always the voters' fault. But everybody else gets free reign to do whatever they want. I don't hear Stephen A. Smith on here calling out the billionaires. I don't hear him calling out the billionaire class. I don't hear him calling out fucking millionaires. And that's why he is on the show, to maintain the status quo, to tell you, you keep voting for the Democratic Party. All you got to do is swap out one status quo politician with a younger one.
Damn shame. And I cover sports. And I see sports people getting hits all the time, 25, 26, 22-year-olds being held more accountable than grown men in their 50s, 60s, and 70s who literally are elected officials in office. And they don't know how to conduct themselves better than 20-year-old sports figures that I cover every day. That's the world that we're living in. It's a damn disgrace, but it's no surprise.
So you see what happens, and I've talked about this before. They will bring on Black people to try to keep Black people in the Democratic Party. And I played this earlier, but I think most of you have not seen this. This young woman ain't trying to hear it. This young woman right here is not trying to hear it. Listen to what she has to say about voting for Joe Biden and the Democratic Party. Listen to this.
I'm not voting for Joe Biden. And there's not a goddamn thing any of you white motherfuckers on this app can do to change my mind or make me feel bad about it. I'm a Black queer woman in America. You can't make me feel bad for shit. It's way too many people in here trying to make people feel bad about not wanting to vote for him. If it's between Trump, a treasonous dictator, and Joe Biden, a genocidal fucking maniac, we don't have a lesser of two evils. And just because you don't value the lives of people of color, of black people, of queer people in this country, doesn't mean that I feel the same. What you're really worried about is losing all that privilege that you have. What you're really worried about is finally being affected by the things that these politicians do to us. I'm not impressed. I'm not impressed with your allyship. Because is it really allyship if you're threatening people who you are saying you're an ally to into voting for someone who doesn't give a fuck about us? Y'all do this every 4 years. And 4 years from now, after whoever gets elected next year is in office and has been for a while, y'all gonna do the same thing. When does it stop? When does it end? Are we gonna be voting for the lesser of two evils for the rest of our lives? Because I'm not doing it no more. I don't care. This place has been shit for a lot of us. And if you think that you're going to make us feel bad or scare us into voting for someone who hates us with the threat of, oh, it's going to get worse, you got another thing coming. Free Congo, free Sudan, free Palestine, free Hawaii, free everybody oppressed all over the world. But liberation is not going to come by voting in Joe Biden. And if you have a problem with that, you can come fight me. But you're not going to beat me. And in the words of Katniss motherfucking Everdeen, as far as I'm concerned, if we burn and been burning, you burning with us, bitch.
Not everybody's falling for it, you know? So mainstream media has to get desperate and they have to bring on other black faces to convince you otherwise. Particularly a lot of younger people are just not falling for this anymore. I think Palestine was the pushing point for a lot of people, to be honest. I'm gonna go to some of the comments here. Thank you for the super chat, Audra. Thank you, Sabby. You are welcome, Audra. Shout out to Leon White for becoming a new member. Let's give Leon a big whoop whoop. Thank you, John. The Missouri Green Party has been doing amazing solidarity with the Uhuru movement. The National Party should follow their lead. Thank you so much for that, John. Awesome, awesome stuff. We're still on the 2024 presidential election, but we are moving on to the issue here with Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis, and Vivek Ramaswamy. I have a couple of highlights here I want to touch on in reference to the GOP debate, which I didn't get a chance to do Friday because I was out. And I'm going to tell you what I believe is the problem with every single one of them, what they're doing wrong, and why they're not gaining the steam that they could gain. But first, I want to start with this clip. Let's start off with the daughter TikTok issue. So apparently, you know, TikTok is one of the issues that has been brought up. Politicians that we have right now actually have concerns over TikTok. They're like, China is watching us and stealing our data and information. But the guy who created TikTok is actually from Singapore. So there's that. But what has come up recently is that apparently some of the politicians that said that they're worried about TikTok or whatever, they've now been called out on the debate stage because of hypocrisy. Now, we're going to start with this conversation between Vivek and Nikki Haley. Listen to this, and I'm going to tell you where I think Vivek, I don't think this helped him. I think this hurt him. But listen to this. Uh-oh. Why is this not playing? That's weird. Okay, that is weird. Don't know what's happening there, but I'm going to remove that and I'll do it on screen share. Sorry about that, guys. I don't know what happened. That was weird. Here, we'll just pull it up on my screen. Yeah, I think it's type VNC, Eric. For whatever reason, that video just isn't, it's just that video. All right, let me go ahead and share it here because I can play it on my screen. All right, let me put it over here. Listen to this. Okay, we're gonna stop it there. Oh, that was weird. Oh, sorry about that, Eric. We're gonna stop it there. I don't know why that doesn't have. What do you want me to do, Eric? What do you mean? What do you mean when you say no audio? I don't know what you want me to do. Oh, I have no sound? Oh, sorry. Let me go back. Doot doot. Sorry about that, guys. I think I forgot to hit share sound. Let me undo this. I haven't done share screen in a while, so it's difficult for me. Can we try it again with type VNC? I don't know why it is not playing on type VNC because it's playing on. Yeah, it's just type VNC. I don't know what's going on there. So we're coming out and then we'll do. Okay, let me try this again. Sorry. We'll do screen share. Oh, it says also share tab audio. It should be sharing it. Can you guys, let me know if you can hear it, Eric. Okay. What is the problem? You guys can't hear this? That's really weird. Try another vid. Okay. I don't know why that's happening. I'll go to another one.
On this app.
Sorry about that. I'll go to another one. I didn't have this issue earlier, so I don't know why that video doesn't have sound now. But anyway, Eric, when we do the clip, just, take this part out. Let me see if this one. Okay, here we go. I don't know if this
value the lives of people of color, of Black people, of queer people in this country. Doesn't mean that I feel the same.
Oh boy.
What you're really worried about.
Stop. Okay. Let's see if you guys can hear. Can you hear it?
Speak to the parents out there. There are probably TikTok apps on half the phones in this auditorium.
No, I'm going to speak to the fact that 2 people hit me and you didn't let me respond.
How do you get TikTok banned if you use it?
Well, I want to laugh at why Nikki Haley didn't answer your question, which was about looking at families in the eye. In the last debate, she made fun of me for actually joining TikTok while her own daughter was actually using the app for a long time. So you might want to take care of your family first.
Leave my daughter out of your voice.
Adult daughter. The next gen.
Okay. This part right here. Look, you don't have to like Nikki Haley. I'm not a fan of Nikki Haley. But I think this piece right here, I think Vivek crossed the line. So rule of thumb, don't be so desperate to try to win that you go after the kids. And I will say this time and time again, no matter what kind of beef you have with someone, you don't go after their children. So what Vivek did here was going after her daughter, whatever her daughter does on TikTok or whatever. This actually made Nikki Haley look better. You see what I'm saying? So there were other ways that he could have come after Nikki Haley on the TikTok issue instead of targeting her daughter. But let's go back in.
Appreciate adult daughter. The next generation of Americans are using it. And that's actually the point. You have her supporters propping her up. That's fine. Here's the truth. The easy answer is actually to say that we're just going to ban one app. We got to go further. We have to ban any U.S. company actually transferring U.S. data to the Chinese. So this is the problem when you have Republicans that temporarily go the way the winds blow, and now it's popular to talk tough on China. When she was UN ambassador, called them literally, her words, not mine, our great friend. You can't be fair weather fans of the right policy. Get to the root cause. Even U.S. companies in Silicon Valley are regularly doing it. Cut the virtue signaling.
When he talks about me praising China, he doesn't know the fact that the reason China was praised was because I negotiated with China and Russia the largest set of sanctions against North Korea in a generation. That is literally the reason North Korea stopped testing ballistic missiles. So I said China did good on their part. That was a negotiation you could never do.
Is what you said, Nikki. Those are your words, not mine. And so just.
So I think that I don't know what happened, particularly with this debate compared to the others, but it's very clear to me that there seems to be some type of desperation coming from Vivek Ramaswamy's campaign this time around compared to the other two debates that he participated in. That could have something to do with his poll numbers because he's been decreasing in the polls. Nikki Haley has been increasing in the polls. And the thing is, I understand. Yeah, I know. I understand her kid is an adult. But what I'm trying to tell you guys, and I'm going to show you in just a second, the way it was received actually put people in favor of Nikki Haley and not Vivek Ramaswamy. That's the thing that I'm saying. And I think coming around, you're going to see this when the new polls come out, because there are other ways you can go after her. For example, with the China issue and the military industrial complex, Vivek can point out the fact that Nikki Haley had deals with weapon contractors. He could point that out. $1 million deals with weapon contractors. I think that would be more like beneficial, right? So the thing is for me, my rule of thumb, I try to keep those other people like out of it and just focusing on the candidate herself. And to the point where people said that her daughter is an adult. Well, if her daughter is an adult, her daughter can make her own decisions. You know, my parents don't have control over what I do. I'm a grown woman. My parents have no control over what I do in my life. So that's another thing. But that actually worked out in Nikki Haley's favor. And I'm going to show you in just a second.
You would never have been able to get that negotiation done. But don't lie to the people about what you've said or what you've done in South Carolina.
My entire career at the United Nations. Every day I fought China, and I did it by making sure no one could get any agency heads in UN. I did it by making sure that we called them out on human rights. I did it by making sure that we held them accountable on everything that they did. That's the reason we got out of the Human Rights Council. That's the reason we called them out. And there's not been a day I haven't stopped.
Senator Scott, it is your turn.
The millions you made afterwards.
Thanks for watching.
Yeah, see, he didn't get all that part in, but the part that I was referring to is the money that she made off of the weapon contractors from those relationships that Nikki Haley had. That was the part that I felt like he would have done better if he focused on. And so because of that, I want you to see what they say here on CNN. Again, Nikki Haley has been climbing in the polls. Vivek has been decreasing in the polls.
If you want to go back to Ramaswamy, who's hard to avoid, the attack dog, what was stunning to me was the amount of vitriol on that stage against one person, particularly from Nikki Haley. She's just had it with him when he talked about her daughter on TikTok and she said, "You're just scum." Those are tough words.
Yeah. You think?
But it was a bad move on his part. I mean, he's just becoming the attack dog. And as David pointed out, he's going down and down and down in the polls. And Tim Scott shows when you're a nice guy, you don't go up and up and up in the polls either.
But you know what, to that exact point.
Actually, Dana has Vivek Ramaswamy. Let's go back to Dana.
So let me pause here before they bring in Vivek. Notice what they're doing here on CNN. They're basically saying Tim Scott is too nice. Vivek is too harsh. So they want you to kind of lean towards like a Nikki Haley. And that's essentially what they're trying to do. I'm going to say this again. I believe CNN would rather have Nikki Haley in office than they would, someone who's running third party independent. They'd rather have them instead of Jill or Cornel West or RFK Jr. They would rather have a neocon in office. Here comes Vivek here.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ramaswamy. Thank you so much. We are on the air now. Let's see, where do I even start? Let's start with the way you started at the beginning of the debate. You really came out hot on kind of everybody.
I'm very frustrated with the losing culture in the Republican Party.
Well, you went after, for our viewers who didn't see the debate, you went after the RNC chair, who is hosting you here. You went after the network hosting you here, and pretty much everybody in between. You say you're frustrated, but they're not your opponents.
No, but I think that what I am doing in this race is speaking truth 360 degrees. I've been very critical of the Democratic Party. If you listen to my final words on stage, I think that it's important that the Democrat Party be honest about who the nominee is going to be. I think we all quietly acknowledge it's very unlikely to be Joe Biden. Be honest with the people now. but I would say the same to the media.
What makes you think that? He's Gavin Newsom.
I mean, why is Gavin Newsom flying on a private jet using private funds or California funds to go to China?
Joe Biden
He's
has,
not running. I mean, Gavin Newsom is not running for president in the same way that Ron DeSantis wasn't running for president for years.
I don't want to talk about Gavin Newsom, but could you ask that question? He's like the 5th or 7th economy in the world in California. But let's talk about Joe Biden.
But what I would say is, to answer your question, because I'm happy to talk about my point about Biden, I just think it's true that Biden is not going to be the nominee. I think that most people in the Democratic Party will quietly acknowledge it. Just say it out loud and you build trust with the people. But what I'm saying is, as a Republican candidate, I can't just call out Democrats and their corruption. I've called out the Hunter Biden corruption from Ukraine and the $5 million bribe. And I will continue to do that. But I'll call it out the Republican Party.
There's no evidence to support
as well.
There's no evidence to support
that he was paid a $5 million bribe from Burisma.
No.
Well, if he was, that's corruption.
Did a fact check.
Okay.
But if he was, I just want you to make an allegation where there's no evidence.
There's literally
to back that up. Our Daniel Dale literally just talked about this on the air.
Absolutely. There's a lot of circumstantial evidence and testimonial evidence to suggest it. You have U.S. senators saying they've received information. The investigations are proceeding as we speak. But that is corruption in the Democratic Party that I have called out, and I think it deserves to be called out in the Republican Party as well.
There's no evidence.
No, I've not admitted there's absolutely evidence.
Circumstantial evidence, but
well, look, Chuck Grassley. Ask Chuck Grassley for the actual recordings that are actually turned over from Burisma.
We have them. Nobody has seen it. But let's
why haven't they released? And I think whether it's one thing I'll just say is bipartisan point. Whether you're Joe Biden or Nikki Haley, release your tax returns. Be completely open about where you've made your money. The American people deserve to know. I did something early in this campaign that, frankly, people in both parties should be doing. I put out 20 years of tax returns. I understand why people don't do it, but that's the kind of honesty we need in both parties, and so that's what I stand for.
Let me pause there, and then we're going to actually move on to the next clip. One thing I want to say is this. I think that some of the things that Vivek is saying, I do think needs to be called out. But I think that what is happening is there's this sense of desperation that's coming from Vivek now ever since he started to decrease in the polls. I felt like the first Republican primary debate, I felt like he was a lot smoother in his delivery and more confident and on point. And I do feel like since that second GOP Republican primary debate, I feel like he has not been that way. And I feel like there was a sense of desperation that came across in this debate, or as B likes to call it, very thirsty. Very thirsty. That's a good way of pointing it, B. Yeah, I just don't think it's working out for him. Now, there's a couple more I want to show you, and then I'm going to tell you why I think all of them are in trouble. And first, I want to go to this issue here with Ron DeSantis, what he says about Gaza. Listen to this.
As President of the United States, what would you be urging Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to do at this moment? Governor DeSantis.
I would be telling Bibi, finish the job once and for all with these butchers, Hamas.
The first thing I said to him when it happened was I said, finish them. Finish them.
I would tell him to smoke those terrorists on his southern border, and then I'll tell him as President of the United States, I'll be smoking the terrorists on our southern border.
If you want to stop the 40+ attacks on military personnel in the Middle East, you have to strike in Iran.
As President of the United States.
So first of all, I want to say it's Iran, if I remember correctly, not Iran, but whatever it is, what it is. Listen to how all of them sound. Listen to how all of them sound. They just want more war, right? They just want to more war. They want more war. They want more violence. Like, it's just, and this is not to say that the Democrats don't want that. The neocons that are part of the Democratic Party want this as well. But what I have gathered from these debates with these particular groups, right? So you got the Tim Scott's talking about we need to go after Iran. Ron DeSantis is like, I would tell Bibi to finish the job now. And then Nikki Haley's just like, I said to finish them. And Vivek is like, well, you got to strike and da-da-da. The problem I think these candidates have is I feel like instead of finding their own lane and being their self, and I felt like at one point Vivek kind of had that, but he's been caught in a couple of things in reference to the war issue where he has not been consistent. I think the problem that they have is that I feel like they're trying to be like their predecessors. like, if you listen to that the rhetoric, these motherfuckers are crazy. I feel like they're trying to be like their predecessors. I feel like, they're either trying to be like Donald Trump or Donald Trump 2.0. Vivek Ramaswamy said he loves Donald Trump. He said Donald Trump was the best president of his generation, but he wants to go further than Donald Trump. Ron DeSantis was also a big Trump supporter. He sounds way more unhinged with some of the war rhetoric than Donald Trump did. I feel like Nikki Haley is just trying to be like George W. Bush with a mixture of Donald Trump in. I don't feel like any of these people have their own lane. I feel like they are trying to either copy Donald Trump or copy part of George W. Bush. I don't even believe these people are who they say they are. I don't believe they believe any of the things they're saying. That's another thing. I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced that Vivek Ramaswamy actually believes some of the stuff that he's saying. I'm just not. Someone mentioned it earlier in the chat. Kinky, has Vivek registered as a Republican yet? That was another thing we talked about on the show, that he wasn't even registered as a Republican. He wasn't even voting Republican. So who are these people? What are they really all about? We get to Nikki Haley. We get to this point here about Ukraine. Listen to this.
What is your take on more funding for Ukraine?
I am telling you, Putin and President Xi are salivating at the thought that someone like that could become president. They would love to see
The fact of the matter is she doesn't answer
So this
the
is what
question.
I will tell you.
We're driving Russia into China's hands because of
you
these
had
foolish
your time
policies.
to talk. The ambassador has the floor.
Thank you.
Ambassador
The first thing I'll tell you is we all remember what that thug did when he invaded Ukraine. We all know that 500,000 people have died because of Putin. And here is a freedom-loving, pro-American country that is fighting for its survival and its democracy.
Now, let me go ahead and show you why Nikki Haley is a fraud. So she's willing to call out Vladimir Putin in reference to the number of casualties in Ukraine. I double checked that number, by the way. But Nikki Haley is not willing to call out Netanyahu in reference to the number of casualties of Palestinians in Gaza. And I'm not talking about since October 7th. I'm talking about even before October 7th. It's not about the number of civilian casualties. It's about American interest and the military-industrial complex and America remaining to be a superpower. That's what this is about.
No, I don't think we should give them cash. I think we should give them the equipment and the ammunition to win. And I'll tell you, if Biden had done it when they first asked for it, this war would be over. But let's also remember
that's not true. See, that's another thing. She's willing. She says we need to give them more weapons and more aid. Okay. But that would also cause more casualties. I do not believe that statement from Nikki Haley, that if Joe Biden did this right from the get-go, that they would have won. No, they wouldn't have. Most of us in independent media have been saying this for quite some time. There was no way that they were going to beat Russia.
this. When you left Afghanistan in shambles and left them with a ton of weapons and money, it's not that we left, it's how we left. When you look at Ukraine, don't think for a second, now everybody wants to move away from Ukraine. They'll want to move away from Israel a year from now.
Let me just interrupt that there as well. Left Afghanistan a bunch of money. There were economic sanctions put on Afghanistan. Children are starving in Afghanistan because of the sanctions implemented from the U.S. government. You have to remember who Nikki Haley works for. She supports the military contractors. She has those deals.
America can never be so arrogant to think we don't need friends. After 9/11, we needed a lot of friends. Now is the time to get partnerships. This unholy alliance between Russia, Ukraine, and China is real. There is a reason the Taiwanese want us to support the Ukrainians. It's because they know that China is coming after them next. There is a reason Ukrainians want us to support Israelis, because they know that if Iran wins, Russia wins.
Ambassador.
We have to see the combination of the three.
Ambassador.
So I just want to add here again, Taiwan is part of China. It's called the One China policy. None of them want to mention that. They always want to leave that part out. And then I want to bring up this clip here about avoiding World War III.
Between you and the candidates we just heard on this issue, on what you would tell the Prime Minister?
Not in terms of what I would tell the Prime Minister, no. In fact, I would go one step further. The founding vision of Israel was based on the idea that they don't want to depend on anybody else's sympathy or direction in defending themselves. So what I would tell Bibi is that Israel has the right and the responsibility to defend itself. I would tell him to smoke those terrorists on his southern border, and then I'll tell him as President of the United States, I'll be smoking the terrorists on our southern border. That's his responsibility. This is our responsibility. That's how we move forward. But I want to be careful to...
You guys see what's happening here with Vivek? Do you see what's happening? Because see, Brianna Joy Brie actually revealed this when she interviewed him on The Hills Rising, that he was like, I'm just about America first and that kind of thing. And no, we need to get out of these wars and da-da-da. But you still have war rhetoric. You're not for pulling out of these wars completely either. You still want these wars to continue. Anytime you sit up there and say you want to smoke terrorists like on our southern border. This is why I don't believe these people. I feel like this is a play and these are all actors. I just don't believe these people are for real. I really don't. I feel like Vivek is acting. He wasn't registered as a Republican. He did not vote. According to the log that was leaked, he didn't even vote for Donald Trump. So I just don't believe this. I think it's a joke, and I think everybody's trying to see if they can be much more harder and badder and meaner than Donald Trump. That's what I feel like this is. So this is not a debate to see who's going to get the Republican nomination for the GOP. We all know that's going to go to Donald Trump. This is just a debate to see who's going to be vice president. And that's if Donald Trump even would consider either one of them. And based on what I've heard, he's not looking at them.
Avoid making the mistakes from the neocon establishment of the past. Corrupt politicians in both parties spent trillions, killed millions, made billions for themselves in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, fighting wars that sent thousands of our sons and daughters, people my age, to die in wars that did not advance anyone's interests, adding $7 trillion to our national debt.
Pause, because this is something that Tulsi Gabbard did that people didn't catch back in the day when Tulsi was running. Pay attention to the phrase wars that advance our interests. Pay attention to that. That does not mean that Vivek is anti-war. That just means he's against wars that don't advance American interests. Now, why am I saying this? Because I felt like I said this about Tulsi Gabbard multiple times back in the day, and people continued to argue me down and tell me that I was wrong. And now all of a sudden people realize, because she says it loud and proudly on Twitter and on other shows, now all of a sudden people realize, oh my God, I can't believe that Tulsi is not anti-war. When I've been telling people this, pay attention to the vocabulary that they use.
Joe Biden sold off our foreign policy. Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, got a $5 million bribe from Ukraine. That's why we're sending $200 billion back to that same country. The fact of the matter is the Republican Party is not that much better. You have the likes of Nikki Haley, who stepped down from her time at the UN. Bankrupt or in debt was her family. Then she becomes a military contractor. She joins the board of Boeing and otherwise, and is now a multimillionaire. So I think that that's wrong when Republicans do it or Democrats do it. That's the choice we face. Do you want a leader from a different generation who's going to put this country first? Or do you want Dick Cheney in 3-inch heels?
All right, Mr.
In which case, we've got two of them on stage
Mr.
tonight.
Ramaswamy, thank you.
So what he said there towards the end, calling out her deals with military contractors, that's good. You need to say that. People need to hear that about Nikki Haley. The 3-inch heels comment at the end, I would have left out, because see, what's going to happen now is now people are saying Vivek Ramaswamy is sexist, yada, yada. So again, I think the problem with these candidates in particular is that They're not even being their self. They just trying to be like Trump 2.0 and a part of George W. Bush, and that's it. That's it. There's nothing special about them. That's the thing. There's nothing that makes Vivek in the beginning. There was something that did kind of make him stand out, but then he's getting caught up and tongue-tied in some of his own positions. Sorry, but it's real. I'm going to go to some of the comments. Thank you, Andrew, for the super chat. From the river to the sea, Biden gets no vote for me. West/Stein 2024. A Hill says Nikki is going to end up being the golden child. I think so. The media seems to like her. Thank you for the super chat. Nahan says, thank God for people like Vijay Prashad. Yes. Deneen says, these are human lives we're talking about. They talk about it like it's a video game. And thank you for the super chat, Mary. Glenn Greenwald said these candidates are the reminder of pre-2008 RNC, not including Vivek. Yeah, it's like people are just in a different place now. Just in a different place. We're going to go to this last story here about Elizabeth Warren and Ro Khanna, and I'm not going to hold you guys up much longer. I know I went over time today, but I do have to cover this. Elizabeth Warren was confronted about her position or her inaction in reference to Israel and Gaza. And you have to see this because I want to show you who Elizabeth Warren really is. A Palestinian woman who lost 68 family members in Gaza, confronts Senator Warren. She had no answer. Watch this. So this is Elizabeth Warren. And I believe that's her husband. It looks like kind of hard to see, but watch this.
Thank you. Can I bring you some water to get started? Of course, we have tap water. We also have butter.
I have 60 members of my family killed over the last 5 weeks. I just want.
Okay, so she is a constituent of Elizabeth Warren, and she just told her that 68 members of her family have been killed over the last 3 weeks. Okay, so listen to that.
I just want to know how many more have to die before you're going to call for a ceasefire.
So she's asking Warren to call for a ceasefire.
I don't know. What do you Wait, I mean, what do I have to do? How many more of my family have to die for you to call for a ceasefire? I don't know. Like, how much more do I have to say for you to call for a ceasefire? People in your office every day asking you to call for a ceasefire, and you are refusing to call for a ceasefire.
I don't think this is the proper place for it.
So then she was told that this is not the proper place, right? But there is no proper place. She said, call Senator Warren and tell her she must call for a ceasefire. And there's the number there. Now, this goes on because they were protesting outside as well. So it says here, Senator Warren supports a Zionist regime that has been oppressing Palestinians for 75 years, especially Gazans for the past 18 years of the blockade.
We don't get it! Shut it down! Let Gaza live! Let Gaza live! Let Gaza live! Let Gaza live! We don't get it!
So this is local to me. So they were, again, outside confronting her. They said, again, Elizabeth Warren, you have blood on your hands. So listen to this one here. This is why I say what these politicians tweet and what they say in these interviews don't mean anything. Because when you talk to them in person, this is how they treat you.
Hey, people in my family, you have blood on your hands! Senator Warren!
There's the restaurant right there. So there's Elizabeth Warren right there. You can see the little blonde little mop right there. I think I know exactly where this is. Because I was looking at this and I'm like, it's dark. I can't see the sign.
You have blood on your hands! Senator Warren! Hey, people!
It's embarrassing, but it's the reality. If you lost 68 members of your family, you'd probably be a bit angry too. So of course, the police came The police did have an appearance there. So it goes on to say, Senator Warren left the restaurant hearing Palestinians, Jews, Harvard students, and Cambridge community members shouting, "Ceasefire now." So yeah, I thought this was in Cambridge. I thought it looked familiar. Listen to this.
Now! Ceasefire 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 now!
So that's them in the car. That's them right there in the car. She's in the passenger seat, I believe. Yep, there she is. So they drove Elizabeth Warren out of that restaurant there. I mean, can you blame them? Now, I want to connect this to the conversation that Khanna had recently on CNN. Why is it that some people are willing to call for a ceasefire and some people are not willing to call for a ceasefire? Khanna is at least willing to have this conversation. Elizabeth Warren is running away from the conversation. So I want you to hear what Khanna says in reference to ceasefire.
While some members of the Progressive Caucus on Capitol Hill have joined in calls for a ceasefire, my next guest here tonight, a high-profile progressive himself, has called for humanitarian pauses instead. The question for some is, does today's announcement go far enough? Congressman Khanna of California is here with me. What do you say? Did the 4-hour pauses go far enough in your view? Is that what you were thinking of?
It's a good first step, but no, more needs to be done. I mean, you need to get 2 million gallons of water in there. We need to get fuel into the hospitals. And while Hamas is using Palestinian civilians as human shields,
Stop. We're going to stop that right there. Pause that right there. No, we're going to stop using that rhetoric. The reason why he's still using that rhetoric is because as long as they continue to say that, they have an excuse not to call for a ceasefire. I want everyone to really understand that. Now listen to what else he says, and then I'm going to tell you why even the humanitarian pause is problematic. I'm going to tell you why that doesn't go far.
I have said that they should not be bombing civilian sites, civilian dense sites, hospitals.
Israel should not.
Israel should not. I mean, I don't think they're intentionally targeting civilians.
But are they doing enough to not hit civilians in your view?
Pause. Listen to the way they're framing this. He says he doesn't think they're intentionally doing this. Guys, there was another hospital that was attacked recently. There was another refugee camp that was attacked. Those are not Hamas. It's gotten to the point where even other mainstream media outlets have had to say, listen, something is not right here. Like these people, they're just hitting whatever and whoever. Doctors at the hospitals have made public statements saying they don't know if they're even going to live, if they're even going to make it because they're attacking the hospitals and they're trying to save the patients. They've cut off the power at one of Sharifa hospital. And so the babies that were on the incubators, one of the babies did not make it. How are the babies supposed to live on the incubators if you cut off the power? Those little babies aren't Hamas. This is what you use to push back on that rhetoric, you guys. When people say, but a husband, no, if you know they're in the tunnels, why are you going after people above ground? Thank you, Soccer. Shifa Hospital. Thank you.
In my view, they should have more operational patience. I mean, look, they have the right to self-defense. It was a brutal attack on October 7th. Any country has the right to get Hamas perpetrators. But when you have a hospital, when you have a school, when you have a refugee camp with many children, even when Hamas is there intentionally, I think you try to get Hamas out, you get them into the tunnels, you track them. Look, it took us 10 years to get Osama bin Laden. But the loss of life there is heartbreaking. And so I would say do not bomb civilian dense sites.
Yeah, I mean, they struck.
So what Khanna has called for is not a ceasefire, but a humanitarian pause to not strike for a couple of hours so that they can get humanitarian aid into the Palestinian people in Gaza, those that are left. And to that, I say this. That's like telling someone who is a victim of abuse to allow the abuser to not beat the crap out of them for a couple of hours. Give them a little bit of a break. Allow the person being abused to be able to get treated, get the supplies and things that they need. And then once that pause is over, you can go back to beating the shit out of them. That's what that sounds like to me. Let's continue.
An ambulance recently, Israel arguing that Hamas was using it to transport weapons and fighters. President Biden said today that he was frustrated that this is not happening soon enough, that he's been pushing President or Prime Minister Netanyahu for a 3-day pause or more. He has a lot of influence on what the prime minister does. He's kind of bear hugged him. He's been one of his biggest supporters since this war broke out. Do you think he could influence him to do more?
He doesn't. I mean, I think certain things, they're just not listening. My sense is that he has asked for the humanitarian pause. He wants the pause to be longer. I think the United States government has had candid conversations about doing more to minimize civilian casualties, and the president is making progress. And I do think that the White House has really stepped up in talking about Palestinian lives and making sure that they're protected.
Your political director just resigned recently because you are not calling for a ceasefire. Would you ever call for a ceasefire? Do you ever see yourself doing that?
I wouldn't rule it out. I mean, at some point, the war has to end. But the reason I didn't call.
He wouldn't rule it out. At some point, the war has to end. How many people have to die before that happens? The numbers continue to increase. He's not calling for, let me be honest with you. He's not calling for a ceasefire because Khanna wants to run for president in 2028. That's why I believe he's not calling for a ceasefire. Elizabeth Warren, she may try to run again too, but Elizabeth Warren, I told you, she's always been pretty weak when people called her progressive. And I said, Elizabeth Warren is not really progressive. And people were telling me that I was being too critical, but you see how she is. These people are not revolutionaries. These people are not ready to fight. These people are not ready to go to battle. These people are not even willing to call for a ceasefire. And we're supposed to believe that these people are going to fight for us in office. Khanna's just thinking about his next career move.
Call for a ceasefire is that when you have the brutal murder of 1,400 civilians and people have committed that terrorist attack, if you just say, okay, let's have a ceasefire, then you're basically saying there was no consequence to doing that. So I think there has.
Let me debunk that.
To be more operational patience, precision, surgical operations, and getting the Hamas terrorists that were accountable. And once we do that, I also think there needs to be a peace process with equality for Palestinian rights.
What is your...
The accountability issue that Khanna just raised doesn't make any sense in reference to a ceasefire, because who has had the power over the decades? That has been Israel, not Gaza. Who has controlled the resources over the decades? That has been Israel, that has not been Gaza. Who stole the homes? Who stole the land? Who put the people in an open air prison? Who occupied the people? Who continued to, berate the people in public? We've seen these videos. Who continue to shame the people? Who prevent the people from leaving the gates of Gaza to being able to get medical treatment in Israel if they need that type of procedure? That has been Israel. So essentially what Khanna is doing, Khanna wants accountability for the part of the population that has been oppressed. But Khanna is not calling for accountability for the state of Israel, the government that has been the oppressor, that has occupied the people, that has shamed the people, and that basically is the reason why they are in this position to begin with in the first place. When you talk about Hamas, you have to also remember the state of Israel funded Hamas. So he wants accountability for one side, but he don't want accountability for the other side. And Khanna doesn't take money from the Israeli lobby. So you see how this is?
thinking on this been? I mean, have you ever been close to calling for a ceasefire? Because this is really dividing your party, but especially progressives.
It's dividing the country. I mean, look, there was a sit-in in my district office today. I've never seen this kind of mobilization since the Iraq War. I mean, there are people out on the street and they're upset with what they're seeing on television. They're upset with what they saw with the Israelis who were killed. They're upset with the hostages, and they're upset with the Palestinian children who are being killed. It's an emotional issue. For me, I said, let's get the water, humanitarian aid. I'm calling 20 members of Congress, and the UN WR commissioner is having a meeting with us on Monday, so we're going to hear directly on the ground what's happening. And I said, let's not have bombing of dense civilian sites. That's where I am right now. But every member has a slightly different perspective. And I
You're
honestly,
not close to calling for a ceasefire.
not a full ceasefire, because I do think that there's still more to be done to get the Hamas terrorists. But there needs to be, in my way, different techniques to doing that.
This is really going to backfire on a lot of these politicians, people like Khanna, people like Elizabeth Warren, because your constituents are not with you. Like, people do not agree with you. You lost people on this particular issue. And like I said before, Khanna is another one that pretends to be progressive, but he's completely captured as well. And I just want to show you how so badly Joe Biden and the Democrats in general are doing with this particular issue. There was actually a protest outside of Joe Biden's home in Delaware. This gentleman here actually supported Joe Biden, and I want you to hear what he had to say.
I organized for him in North Carolina and Georgia. I did 2 years of my life to save this country's democracy. And this man is responsible for thousands of children's death. The genocide taking place right now. Over 11,000 civilians and 4,000 of our children are dead. Every day they're bombing hospitals, mosques. They're public executions in West Bank and Gaza. Shame on him. Please convey him. Thank you. God bless.
Okay, so that gentleman was someone who supported Joe Biden. It said, we're outside Biden's personal home in Delaware where thousands are marching and a demand to end the U.S. supports for Israel massacre of the Palestinian people. So that was just one of the things. And then there was actually Breakthrough News reported this, that media workers have taken over the lobby of New York Times headquarters in New York City in protest of their biased coverage of Palestine. So it says here they are reading from newspapers bearing the names of the thousands of Gazans murdered by Israel in the last month. Look at this.
Ceasefire now! Killed by apartheid Israel on October 7, 2023. Ceasefire now! Mohammed al-Salhi, killed in Gaza by apartheid Israel on October 7, 2023. Ceasefire now! Mohammed Lafi. Ceasefire.
So again, that is the New York Times office. And honestly, the media, right? One of the most overlooked venues to actually fight back against. We think about politicians, but also the media are the ones that keep the narrative at bay. There were also several Congress staffers, over 100 congressional staffers that walked out in DC demanding a ceasefire as well. It says laying over thousands of flowers to honor those who were killed. And you can see a little bit of this here.
We are congressional staffers on Capitol Hill, and we are no longer comfortable being silent.
We were horrified by the brutal October 7th attacks on Israeli civilians, and we are horrified by the overwhelming response by the Israeli government that has killed thousands of innocent Palestinian civilians in Gaza. Our constituents are pleading for a ceasefire, and we are the staffers answering their calls every day.
Most of our bosses on Capitol Hill are not listening to the people they represent. We demand our leaders speak up, call for a ceasefire, a release of all hostages, and an immediate de-escalation now. We are gathered here today to mourn the loss of every single beautiful and innocent life. We join now in a moment of silence in interfaith prayer for those who we have lost.
And then they go into the moment of silence there. So yes, that was congressional staff members. But not everybody was as off the mark about this issue. In fact, former President Jimmy Carter actually understood this issue very well. As you know, Jimmy Carter was only a one-term presidential president. And could this be part of the reason why? I'm not sure. But this is old school. It's old video, so it's kind of fuzzy. So sorry. But this is Jimmy Carter when he was on Hardball back in the day. And I want you to hear what Jimmy Carter had to say in reference to the issue with Gaza. Listen to this.
And also emphasize the word not, that is peace and not apartheid. That's what I hope to accomplish with this book, is some move toward that goal. But there's no doubt that within the occupied territories, Palestinian land, that there is a horrendous example of apartheid. The occupation of Palestinian land, the confiscation of that land that doesn't belong to Israel, the building of settlements on it, the colonization of that land, and then the connection of those isolated but multiple settlements, more than 200 of them, with each other by highways on which Palestinians can't travel, and quite often where Palestinians cannot even cross. So the persecution of the Palestinians now under the occupied territories is under the occupation forces is one of the worst examples of human rights deprivation that I know. And I think
even worse though than a place like Rwanda.
Yes, I think yes. You mean now?
Yes.
I
think the impression now of the Israelis, of the Palestinians by the Israelis, is worse than a situation in Africa like the oppression of Rwandans and the Civil War.
I'm not going back into ancient history about Rwanda, but right now, the persecution of the Palestinians is one of the worst examples of human rights abuse I know, because the Palestinians...
When you're talking about right now, you're not talking about, say,
I'm not talking about ancient history, no.
Well, Rwanda wasn't ancient history, it was just a few years ago.
You could talk about Rwanda if you want to. I want to talk about Palestine.
So you heard that part right there? He said it was one of the worst human rights abuse issues that he's seen. This was many years ago.
What is being done to the Palestinians now is horrendous in their own territory by the occupying powers, which is Israel. They've taken away all the basic human rights of the Palestinians, as was done in South Africa against the blacks. And I make it very plain in this book that the apartheid is not based on racism, as it was in South Africa, but it's based on the desire of a minority of Israelis to acquire land that belongs to the Palestinians and to retain that land, and then to exclude the Palestinians from their own property and subjugate them so that they can't arouse and demonstrate their disapproval of being robbed of their own property. That's what's happening in the West Bank. And the people in this country, in America, never know about this. They never discuss this. There's no debate about it. There's no criticism.
And sorry, that's all I have of that clip. But I think that is a very telling moment there from Jimmy Carter, calling this out back then. But there are some who are still calling it out today. And like I said, like there were people who were calling out this issue before October 7th. And Dr. West is still doing that. And I think you need to hear this speech from Dr. West. This was sent to me earlier today, of what he has to say about standing with the people that are occupied. And by the way, I cannot be moved on this issue. I cannot be moved on this issue. I see some people want to email and send a DM and say, but what about this? What about that? I cannot be moved on this issue. I will always stand with the people and fight for the people who are oppressed and the people who are occupied, because they are not the ones in power. They are not the ones that control the resources. You always fight for those people. So I want to be very clear about that. And Cornel West delivers that so beautifully. And this is why someone like Cornel West, Jill Stein, RFK ain't good on this issue. But this is why they do feel that these other candidates are going to be a threat to the duopoly, because they are going into places where the Democratic Party and the Republican Party is not willing to go. Listen to this.
Years have been terrorized, traumatized, and hated, and we dish out love warriors and freedom fighters every generation, which means that we stand in solidarity with anybody who's occupied, anybody who's subjugated, anybody who's exploited. And that's why we focus on Gaza at this moment, because a genocidal attack is taking place. Yeah. 10,000 dead and 4,000 precious children. And don't let anybody tell you that because you love Palestinians and Palestinian babies that you hate somebody else. It just doesn't follow what our brothers and sisters. We don't hate Jewish brothers. We don't hate Jewish sisters. We don't hate Jewish siblings. We loathe, we hate a vicious Israeli occupation. We loathe and we hate a vicious siege against Gaza. And the least we can do at this moment of overwhelming barbarity is have a ceasefire. And yet you got these cowards in Washington, D.C. talking about a humanitarian pause. Please get off the crack pipe. Wake up. See the humanity of precious Palestinian brothers and sisters. And the American empire has the nerve in this building to veto a humanitarian pause with our precious Palestinian brothers and sisters being bombed. What kind of country are we? What kind of people are we? And we send a message to Palestinian brothers and sisters and siblings in Gaza. You are not forgotten. We see you. We focus on you. We give attention to you. And it doesn't mean that we're not concerned with our indigenous
brothers and sisters. So I think you can see this on TikTok, guys. So there's more clips of this on TikTok. But again, like not everybody is wrong on this issue. Some people do have it right. So if you were to ask me, if you're thinking about who you are going to support come 2024, for me, I would never support someone who gets this issue wrong. I have been consistent on that, very consistent on that. I still stand by that, regardless of who the person is. I'm not voting for any candidate that doesn't get this position correct. And that's where I stand on that. And I would also advise you of this, because it's very clear to me, there are going to be people that you may like. There are going to be movers and shakers that are actively going to go out of their way, wait for it next year, out of their way to try to prevent and try to discourage you from supporting people outside of the duopoly. Hell, it may even come from people who said they support third party and independent candidates. And then you'll have to ask yourself, why are they doing that? I don't believe that everybody who says they advocate for third party and independent candidates actually is telling the truth. There are infiltrators everywhere. And I believe that some of the people that say that are also infiltrated. You can just tell, just pay attention. Because if I turn around and I see that you saying all that, but every time we have all these different independent or third party like people like running, doesn't even have to be national races, even local races, and you do nothing but attack. This is not to say you can't criticize. Everyone can be critiqued. But you do nothing but attack. But I see you mighty quiet about people running in the Democratic Party and people running in the Republican Party. I'm looking at you with a side eye. Pay attention to that. You'll see that too next year. Pay attention to the people who say they're pro third party and independent, but they're criticizing the third party and the independent candidates, and they're not critiquing the Republican candidates and the Democrat candidates. Or maybe they are critiquing the Democrat candidates, but they're not critiquing the Republican candidates. Pay attention to that. For some people, they could be trying to shift you into the Republican Party. Watch out for that. And for some, it could just be personal bullshit. Watch out for that. But for me, when I go to vote, I damn sure am going to make sure I vote for the person who is right on that particular issue. And if they don't get that issue right, can't vote for them, period. So let's not be fooled. And let's be very cautious, because I've seen this happen before. I'm in organizing spaces, but previously in organizing spaces, I've seen people come in that claim to support the effort, and then they're actively working against the effort that they claim that they support, meantime offering no other solution. And on this show, what we're going to do is, you're not supposed to come to this show and just hear criticism and just hear attack and hear what's wrong and what's bad. The idea is for you to hear what's wrong, but then for you to see there's other options and there's other solutions. Because you can watch drama on TV. But my thing is, keeping it real is this: if you're not presenting people with any other type of solutions, and your goal is just to attack and smear and take down everybody, this is bad, I hate this, I don't like that person, everybody's the enemy and everybody's bad but you, and you're not offering no other solutions, I don't want to hear it. Because I want people to have some positivity. I know things aren't perfect. I get it. Trust, I know. But what I don't want to happen is for you to leave this show and feel like all hope and all energy is lost and it's not worth it doing anything. Because that's not who I am. That's not who I am. So hopefully, when you come over here, hopefully you do get some type of motivation to do something else. It doesn't always have to be on the national level. It can be within your community. Like I told you, we have the food and clothing drive this Saturday. We have RBN chapters in different locations in the United States. Why do you think we started those chapters? Because we know after all this is over with in 2024, a lot of people are going to go back to sleep. They have nothing else to go back to because they're only focusing on electoral politics and they're not organizing within their communities. That's why we started those chapters, to give you something else to do. So my thing is this: if don't be calling me or texting me or emailing me with any bullshit. If you're not coming to me with any other solutions or any other options, and you're just coming to me to complain that you don't like this and you don't like that, I'm not trying to hear it. Come to the table with some solutions, concrete solutions and suggestions and other things to do other than just shitting on everyone and all these people all the time. Because that will get old. And believe me, I'm just going to tell you from experience, people might be with that for now, but eventually people will turn away because people will get tired of hearing it. So you want to come with some solutions. The food and clothing drive is this Saturday. I think I'm good on donations. Don't send no more donations. Just say that. I think we're good on that. We met earlier today. I think we're good. Boston Community Harvest Food and Clothing Drive, November 18th. That is at the Marcus Garvey Center, 116 Dudley Street, Boston, Massachusetts. Come on out and hang out. Again, don't mail me any more donations. Don't mail anything else. We're really good. So, but I appreciate you guys. Like, you guys really did come through. So I hope to see some of you there this Saturday. This is what we're doing over at RBN. This is what we're about. This is why we started those chapters, to get people to organize and realize it's about changing things within your community. And you don't really have control over what happens on the national level, but you do have some control over organizing within your community. And that is very important. And that's what I want you to walk away with when it comes to this show. I can't speak for everybody else. I'll take that comment on Rockfin, and then I do have to head out, Eric. Thanks. Thank you so much for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Quick, stop Indian on Indian crime. The interviewer asked Vivek, why attack them? They're not your opponent. I think someone needs to remind this woman what a primary is. The people in the audience are not the ones that are going to be fighting these wars. So the high schoolers, this video. Interesting. Thanks, Roger. Thanks, Roger. Thank you for the super chat, Justin. The failure of the two-party system to meet people's basic needs has created a vacuum. Open the door to good third parties like the Green Party, but also open the door to con men like Trump and Vivek. Here you go. Thank you, Gala. Okay, maybe I will vote for Dr. West after all. Fire. Thank you, Justin. Sounds like you're talking about Jimmy, Sabby. Thanks for the amazing work that you do. I'm not calling out any names in particular. I'm just saying, like, people are tired of negativity. Like, offer solutions. Thank you, Roger. CBIs, worker co-ops, public banks is the ticket. Thank you so much for that. And that includes people on Twitter too, by the way, because Twitter is just a hot mess of negativity. That's why I like to be on there that much. So the thing is yeah. We all know shit's fucked up. We all know that there's a lot of damn problems. My thing is come with some alternatives and come with some other solutions. That's it. That's it. That's it. All right, guys, I do have to go because I did go over time. Thank you guys for hanging out so much. You know, I'm not here on Mondays. I will be back on Tuesday evening. Other than that, have a good night. Keep up the fight.